Hey Google, hey everybody, hey all targeted individuals or people, fighting tyranny or non-consensual human experimentation in the United States and other countries. This your boy, this your boy Vulcan Wolverine or Kyle, um, and welcome to everybody in chat who's coming in. I'm gonna wait a little while. I'm gonna kind of just talk about recent things that are going on with me, but I really I found a video of James Giordano talking at Westpoint, and it was for, let's see, it's like the Modern War Institute at Westpoint, and it's from October. And so I went through like the first 10 minutes of it, and he was saying some really important stuff. And James Giordano is like one of the top guys that I can find out there who's actually talking about neuroscience and neurotechnology being turned into neuroweapons. So talking about remote neural manipulation, remote neural monitoring, and things like that. Let me go ahead and open the window of the chat room and say hey to you guys. I don't think I'm gonna play a song or anything like that, but I'm just gonna wait for a couple more people to get in, and then we're gonna all go through this presentation that he gives, and I'll give you all the link if you want to go watch it. It's about an hour, and I haven't watched it all yet. But whenever he's doing it, whenever he does a new speaking engagement, always want to get that, get that out, or give y'all the link, or go through it, because he says stuff that you can just concretely say, okay, they are using this stuff for war. It is. The Army does know about this. The DoD does know about this. And now it's so important because they're actually, having classes about neuro warfare and neurotechnology, neuro weapons at Westpoint with these people who are going to go into the military, who are going to go into the Navy or the Army, somewhere in the DoD. So give me 1 second, guys. Let me open up some more of my windows here. I hope all you guys are doing okay, are doing well. I'm not. I haven't made a video in a while because I've been just feeling so bad. And it just really, it's like a year and a half ago, my attackers kind of went down on the physical hardcore torture all the time. Like they still do that, but they kind of tone that down a little bit. And it seems like that's when I started having more and more problems with my emotions, with hopeless feelings that were very artificial, because I've never felt hopeless in my life, not even about the biggest things. So they're really working on me now with remote neural manipulation. And of course, to do that, they've got to have that bidirectional stream of electromagnetic frequencies go into the head. So with a lot of those, with a lot of that, I've done the grounding, which helps with it helps with what they are producing in the nervous system, the pain that they are producing in the nervous system. But I still have all that electromagnetic, all that directed energy going to my head all the time. So it's still hard, even with defending like I do, it's still tough. And last night I fell asleep on the leather chair, and I actually slept, or I didn't really sleep. I mean, if you want to call it sleep, because as targeted individuals, we try and go to sleep. We're getting directed energy dream. We're getting dream manipulation. We're getting dream manipulation, like they're doing stuff to our body through our nervous system, and then also external hits. And there's some stuff, guys, like there's some stuff that my attackers are doing to me now that they're so dehumanizing. They're so dehumanizing. Like, of course, y'all know about, sexual dreams and messing with the groin area with this directed energy. But they've been doing some stuff that's like so dehumanizing. I don't even want to talk about it on my videos. Like, it's so embarrassing. And it has to do with, I mean, I think y'all can figure it out. I've talked about it before, but it has to do with them controlling, I guess, controlling my bathroom function when I'm asleep. And it's very embarrassing because I know that if people do not believe in this remote neural manipulation technology, which it's obviously concretely real, and it is being used on you know, citizens all over the world. But if they don't believe that, it's it just is very embarrassing to me. And I know we talk about that sometimes, but some of the combinations of things they're doing to me, the remote neural manipulation when I'm sleeping, is just so dehumanizing, and it's been going on for so long. And so, you know, I went to sleep on the leather chair last night, and I think I slept from yesterday at about, you know, noon to like 7 at night. And I kind of got up, but I couldn't even move. And I was just like, I'm going to go back to sleep. Like, and I just kept sleeping, kept having these really weird dreams. And I slept from like 7 at night again. So it was like noon yesterday till 6 in the morning, because I just couldn't get up. Like, my body was just like so weary, and my mind was in just like, and I was thinking about it. And I do get, you know, I do get the high pitched tinnitus like sound, especially because I haven't been listening to Dave Case's CD enough. But I just kind of sit there, and I'm just like, all this stuff, they're hitting me with all this stuff, and I'm just kind of slumped on the leather chair, like, okay, I can't even move. I don't want to do anything. You know, but I eventually, like, it was 6 in the morning, and I got up thinking it was probably like midnight or something. And I was like, whoa, it's 6 in the morning. I was literally bedridden. This is a point where I'm like hurting and so tired that I literally didn't want to get out of bed, not because I was tired, but just because like I felt like I couldn't do anything. But I hope you guys are getting through everything okay. I hope you're using some defenses that, you know, that give you some comfort. I'm going to go in to the chat here. You know, I appreciate everybody dropping by. Hey, Nobody. Hey, Tim Greenglass. Tim, you say, okay, Nobody, good luck. Good luck on your doctor's appointment. And Tim says, I think I got hit with a heart attack frequency once, but never got anything in the, yeah, they constantly, I mean, they used to externally hit me in the crotch. Now with that heart attack frequency, Tim Greenglass, I would really recommend getting Dave Case's CD, because it's given me a lot of help with how they make my stomach hurt, or they make my heart seem like somebody was squeezing it. And Dave Case's CD really helped me with that stuff, but they still hit me externally in the crotch, and then they do certain things that are, you know, that I don't want to go into right now. But okay, guys, we got 6 people watching, and thanks everybody for coming. So what I wanted to do today, and I just found this presentation that James Giordano did. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. You know, I'm trying to find other people like him. I'm trying to find other people that talk about neurotechnology, that talk about actually, you know, reading the brain from a distance, and they talk about it in an army, like in a war setting, and you know, like for the DoD, like, and he's giving a presentation to a bunch of Westpoint students. So they're trying to teach these soldiers that are training to be soldiers, and you'll hear some interesting things that he says, some very scary things, but interesting, and it gives people more of a concrete evidence that this is going on. If they put this together, if they put what he's saying together with the things that we're saying, then it makes complete sense. Then all this lines up, and people can see, okay, the Army is using this, the Navy, the Air Force, the DoD, they are looking into this stuff. They're doing research and development. It is about attacking people. It is about controlling people, interacting with their brain and their nervous system. You know, it is about those things. And so it gives that straight bridge. Like if people are like, oh, well, we don't have any evidence, you know, the Army's not using this stuff. This guy talks about it. He's talking about it. So we can put the things that James Giordano says along with the Cuban embassy attack and the China consulate. And I'm going to be looking for more of these guys. But what I think the deal is, that this guy is a major spokesman for this. Like, he's actually being assigned to get the information out there in a way that it can help their investors and help people that are going into the Army to understand it, and help, you know, contractors and things like that, but not to give it away, like all the non-consensual human experimentation that they're doing in the world. And guys, wait, I'm going to go back to the chat room. Well, I guess you guys can hear me. Yeah, you guys can probably hear me. Let me see. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second, just in case, because I can't open up, like I have that other program that I use so that if I'm not doing a live stream, I can just use that and you can see, you know, see my monitor, you see my webcam, and it's not opening. So I'm not sure if that has something to do with my webcam being broken, but guys in chat, can y'all just tell me if y'all can hear me? Tim, can you hear me? You guys can hear me. Yeah, okay, because you're talking about what it said. Okay, cool. I just wanted to make sure because I'm having a lot of technical difficulties with my computer and especially with the programs that I'm using to do videos. Okay. So let's go ahead and start this off. I'm going to read this about it. The Modern War Institute at Westpoint. So I guess it's this institute. Students come, they learn about modern warfare and things that are going on. So MWI video, The Brain is the Battlefield of the Future, Dr. James Giordano. And this is from October 29th, 2018. So in this video, Dr. James Giordano speaks to the United States Military Academy cadets and faculty about the human brain and the future of war. Giordano is chief of the Neuroethics Studies Program and scholar in residence in the Pellegrino Center for Clinical Bioethics at Georgetown University. Recent history has seen substantial advancements in neuroscience and neurotechnology. Giordano explains these advancements are almost certain to impact the wars are fought in the future. In many ways, the brain might even become part of the battle space. And it is. Like, I mean, that's the newest battle space is the brain of us, you know, and that's why they're doing so much research and development and torturing us so bad and trying to clear neural pathways so that then they can use more of this remote neural manipulation to affect our nervous system and affect how our brain is working, you know, whether or not we're happy or sad, emotions, memories, you know, our visual space, and other things like that. And a lot of psychic driving and making you feel like what I noticed last night and when I notice when I sleep, you're so undefended. Like, and I mean, if I'm sleeping in my Faraday bunker and stuff like that, and I got Dave Case CD on and I'm grounding, I'm using defenses, but when you go to sleep, your brain is resting, it's at rest. So I feel like, you know, my attackers and probably y'all's attackers, they're always trying to do psychic driving and subliminal things like that, even when we're awake. But I think when it most affects us is when we're asleep. So that's why things like Dave Case's CD are so important to use when you're sleeping, and also other defenses, grounding, passive shielding, you know, whatever you got. And you guys have maybe figured out some stuff that I don't even know about. Before I start this video, and it's pretty long, and I'm just going to go through the whole thing, guys. And you know, you can go. I think you can go to YouTube and just get it by itself. Dr. James Giordano, The Brain is the Battlefield of the Future. So that's what you look up under YouTube. But I'm going to go through it. I went through the first 10 minutes, and so I just thought, you know, I need to do a live stream. I need to put a video out to do something against this. So I'm going to go through the whole thing. But before I start it, I did kind of want to tell y'all about something really, really positive that happened to me. And I was thinking about maybe doing just a video about this, but you know, these are the things that really pump me up. I was hanging out with my parents and my grandma on Sunday, and it was my dad's birthday. I think it was like Thursday. It was my dad's birthday, or Wednesday or Thursday. And my parents came into town for that weekend. And Sunday we were hanging out, and you know, I didn't watch the Saints game with them. I was just feeling too crappy, and you know, so I ate lunch with them, and I was like, you know, talking to my grandma, and she was like, "You don't come to see me enough," and I was like, "Yeah, I'm sorry, Grandma. I'm just dealing with some things." And she goes, "Yeah." I'm trying to think exactly what she said, but she said, yeah, it takes a lot of courage to fight some of the bad things that are happening in society. Like, and I don't talk to her about my targeting or anything like that. But what happens is my family talks about it when I'm not there. Like my aunt and my mom, they will talk about it around the dinner table if they're having dinner with my grandma. So she's been kind of hearing about stuff from the family, and she knows me. She knows that I'm not crazy or a liar or anything like that. So even without knowing about any of this technology, my grandma actually looked at me and goes, yeah, it takes a lot of courage to fight bad things that are going on in our society. And so I just wanted to tell you all that because she knows nothing about this technology, but she knows me. So, you know, be looking for those situations where you have people that really trust you, you know, and they may not know anything about this, but they know you. And so it was something that really kind of lifted me up. Now, of course, then, yeah, that I was feeling good about that. And then I went home and, you know, been isolated since then and, you know, feel kind of just really wiped out. You know, from all this, struggling to keep my head above water like all you guys, I'm sure. Okay, so enough babble. I'm going to go ahead and start the video, guys. And I may stop it every once in a while, but it's just really important information. I'll probably be stopping it if I hear something really, really important, but I just want to play it on through on my channel. And you can find it on this website. nwi.usma.edu. And so the link's on there. And I guess I'll go ahead and put this link in the description for the video after I finish doing the live stream. Okay, guys.
Good afternoon, and thank you for coming to today's MWI speaker event with Dr. James Giordano. Dr. Giordano is a professor in the Department of Neurology and Biochemistry, Chief of Neuroethics Studies Program of the Pellegrino Center for Clinical Bioethics, and co-director of the O'Neill Pellegrino Program in Brain Science and Global Health Law and Policy at Georgetown University Medical Center. As well, Dr. Giordano currently serves as an appointed member of the United States Department of Health and Human Services Secretary Advisory Council on Human Research Protections. He's a researcher and task leader of the European Union.
Wait, okay, I didn't hear that part. So he is now. Let's hear that again. What?
States Department of Health and Human Services Secretary Advisory Council on Human Research Protections.
On Human Research Protections.
And task leader of the European Union Human Brain Project, and has served as an appointed member of the Neuroethics Legal and Social Issues Advisory Panel of the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, and Senior Advisory Fellow of the Strategic Multi-Layer Assessment Branch of the Joint Staff of the Pentagon. Quite a bit. In his spare time, he has authored over 260 publications in neuroscience and neuroethics, 7 books, and 13 government white papers on neurotechnology, ethics, and biosecurity, and is an editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Philosophy, Ethics, and Humanities in Medicine. Dr. Giordano, thank you for joining us today.
Okay, now that's really interesting how he's on that board for human experimentation. You know, that may be something to throw people off because he's involved with this he's involved with, you know, advising the Pentagon on neuroweapons. He's involved in the European Brain Project. So it'd be interesting, man. I really want to get in touch with this guy. And I tried, but I haven't tried really hard getting in touch with him. Maybe we could get him to, I don't know, I don't know. Maybe if he's on that board for, you know, human experimentation, then we could get in touch with him through there. But I'm sure he knows about this. So I don't know. I'm trying to think of some way that we could contact him, and, you know, I doubt he would help us out, but it would be maybe worth a try just asking him about it, you know.
No. Don't applaud now. Wait till the end because the performance pressure is much too severe if you do that. And my thought is you're probably not going to applaud at the end, but what I'm going to hear is the slamming shut of your sphincters with fear. That's good. That's been successful. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a real honor to be here. Is that Yoshi in the audience? Hello. No PDAs, but I do want you to come up and say hello. Your mother says hello. Everybody has a mother, I know her. So what we're here to talk about today is the fact that the brain is and will be the 21st century battlescape. End of story. We could stop it there, and I could let you go back to your respective units and think about that for a while, but I'm here to tell you absolutely, as much as there's a big old Tyrolean nose on this face, that you will encounter some form of neurocognitive science that has been weaponized not only in your military career, but in your personal and professional life.
So did you hear what he just said? He told all these cadets that they will encounter some form of neurotechnology that has been weaponized not only in their military career, but in their personal and professional lives. I mean, that is saying neuroscience weaponized. You will come into contact with this sometime in your career.
So the idea of the brain as the battlescape is very important. And more importantly is this other acronym that's up there, which is WMD squared. Please get used to this, because this is going to be part of the idea of irregular warfare and ongoing military innovation in your careers. Weapons of mass destruction and disruption. Disruption and influence will be the key to creating peer capabilities and asymmetrical engagements. Let me say it again. It will be the key.
And I'm sorry, guys. I'll stop stopping it so much so we can get through it. But I mean, he's talking about disruption and control. So disruption and control with neuroweapons. So you think about what they're doing to us as targeted individuals. They're disrupting our lives. They're traumatizing us, disrupting our lives, disrupting our families, disrupting, you know, the communities that we live in, and trying to control us through remote neural manipulation and torture and things like that. So it lines up specifically with their goals when he says, you know, WMD squared, disruption and control. The goals of research and development with neuroweapons is disruption and control. And then you line it up with what targeted individuals are saying about this torture, about gang stalking, about remote neural manipulation and the things that they're doing to our minds and our nervous systems. And it lines up perfectly. Asymmetrical warfare. Asymmetrical warfare.
Peer capability in asymmetrical relations and engagement. If we talk about what brain science is, let me just give you a little bit of brief background on this field that is now called neuroscience. As a titular field, as a named field, neuroscience has only been in existence for 40 years. I know that because I've been a neuroscientist for about 38 of those 40. When I first applied to get into a program in neuroscience, there were only 4 neuroscience programs in the continental United States. 4. Right now, at this particular point, there are well over 200 dedicated university and collegiate programs, several programs at the junior college level, several programs at the high school level, and many, many dozens of independent think tanks and philanthropic organizations solely devoted to brain sciences. That's just here in the United States. Furthermore, what becomes critically important for you to understand is that brain science is not just a United States enterprise or effort, nor is it singularly an effort of the United States allies worldwide. Increasingly, it is becoming an international, multinational, global, and independently exercised event and endeavor, which increases the capability of the brain sciences to develop not only new theories, but have more sophisticated tools. I like this slide a lot because what it presents to you, ladies and gentlemen, is a century-long history of brain science, even before it was called neuroscience. Look, let's face it, for as long as human beings were looking in some reflective pool and recognized that the thing looking back at them was themselves, there was some interest in what makes me me, what makes me think, what makes me feel, what makes me behave the way I do and you behave and think the way you do. What is my sense of self? Do I have free will, and what is the nature of that? And how can we affect that in a variety of ways that go from the non-kinetic all the way to the kinetic? We take centenary jumps into the era of the Enlightenment. We can see the great thinkers that came before during the Enlightenment, inclusive but not limited to people like Rene Descartes, pondered the idea of what that means. Cogito, ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. The inverse of the statement that in many cases was implicit but now becomes ever more explicit is what makes me think. I can understand what makes me think and makes you think and makes you feel, then that understanding may in fact flavor, if not directly influence, the way you and I interact. But more than that, if in fact I understand how it is that your brain does what your brain does, I may be able to access your brain and affect your brain indirectly and directly.
Accessing the brain directly and indirectly. So he's talking about accessing the brain, remote neural monitoring, remote neural manipulation. They can tell how we're thinking and what we're feeling and things like that. and they can interact, they can interface with the brain. And the other night, and I'm sorry I'm stopping it so because this is kind of long, so I do want to get through this whole presentation that he's doing. It's just what he's saying is so important. He's kind of like the poster boy for neuro weapons that they're putting out there. And I guess that's because he's an advisor to the Pentagon, so they trust him not to let slip, you know, hey, we're working, you know, we're experimenting on human beings without them knowing about this. But it's important to know, because I heard the other night, Ella did an interview with this guy named Xander, and really smart guy, knew a lot about technical stuff, computers, virus protection. You know, he's studying the frequencies that you know, that were hitting him, the directed energy weapons that were hitting him. But somebody asked him about remote neural monitoring and remote neural manipulation, and he was like, you know, I'm looking at, he's looking at what's out there, what's not classified, right? And he's saying, I don't think they can do that. You know, they can't have access to the brain. They can't, you know, have access where they can manipulate brain function or manipulate, you know, they can shoot a frequency that can mess with your moods, but, you know, knowing your inner voice and stuff like that, he was like, I just don't buy it. This is a really smart guy who's a targeted individual. I don't know if he'd been targeted for so long, but that's why this stuff is so important. I see this brain entrainment and remote neural manipulation as the most important hurdle, the biggest challenge that we as targeted individuals have. Because if we can find ways to defend against brain entrainment and, you know, remote neural manipulation stuff, at least if not 100%, at least to tone it down, then we'll be fighting with all that we are. We may be getting hit with external hits, we may be dealing with gang stalking, but we'll have somewhat of our own minds, you know, that you know, it's very important. Because if you're just totally being remote neural manipulated all the time to be anxious, to be aggressive, to be angry, then you're not dealing with the external hits and the gang stalking as well. You know, you're more in control of your attackers. So this is one of the most important things. So I do want to this, you know, I'll keep playing it, but that's why this is so important to me, because I've dealt with it to where it's 100% that remote neural monitoring and remote neural manipulation are going on. Our attackers, because I have Audible V2K, they have demonstrated to me what they are monitoring of my brain. You know, like, I mean, I will think of I'll think of an actor and they'll say, oh, he's thinking about this actor. Oh, he's thinking about this. I thought about this morning, I was thinking about my time at college and how I had my Jeep Grand Cherokee back then. And they're like, oh, he's thinking about college, you know. And some of that may come from that inner voice monitoring, but a lot of it does come from visual. They can see visual. They can see visuals from the visual cortex because they're getting a signal, whatever signal that the visual cortex is producing, they're reading. You know, so it's very, very important, because it's one of the, well, I guess everything about this is horrible, and I say this a lot, but it's one of the most horrible things to feel like you've got people that are torturing you and, you know, and doing V2K, psychic driving all the time, 24 hours a day, years and years and years. And this is what traps us, them being able to see what's going on with our emotions, see what we're thinking about, and then manipulate that. It's the worst thing about this targeting. It's the most dehumanizing part of it. So it's very, very important that we realize that this is so ingrained in targeting.
And what this allows us to do is to create tremendous potential and possibility and probability, potential, possibility, and probability of what the brain sciences can do and will do. Remember these three letters, A, and A. Keep them as your viable mantra for the duration of this course, day, and throughout your professional careers and each and all of the opportunities that you have to interface and try to understand the power that the brain and cognitive sciences can yield. A, the ability to assess the brain and its functions. A, the ability to access the brain on a variety of levels, from the subcellular all the way to the social. A, the ability to affect the brains and the individuals in which those brains are embodied and the ecologies in which those individuals enact, engage, counter, from the level of the individual to the group, to the community to the population. Look at the power that understanding tools, techniques, brain sciences afford. There before you on the screen. Obvious.
And when you look at that, I got to get this off the screen. When you look at the potential and the goals of neuroweapons, like the potential and the goals of not only, not only directed energy as, these neuro weapons and things like that, but also chemical interactions. A lot of targeted individuals are attacked by, chemicals. They're bombarded by chemicals that have a neurological effect. But when you look at these goals, these potentials and these goals, and then you listen to what targeted individuals say, when you listen to what we say, it becomes very, very clear that what we're telling people, our testimonies, are the truth. Because they're saying, okay, we've got this neuroscience and this neurotechnology. We're going to try and harness and engage neuroscience technology in convergent, multidisciplinary approaches to study, define, predict, and influence human ecologies. Now, what is part of a human ecology? Humans are a part of human ecologies. Affect human activities on individual, group, and population levels. So they want to affect human activities. They want to affect what a human being is able to do. Am I able to go to work now because I'm being targeted? No, I'm not able to go to work. I'm not able to spend as much time with my family as I want to. You guys are probably experiencing a lot of things. Some targeted individuals, they can't even go outside because the gang stalking and the attacks are so bad and they feel so unsafe. Now, I would say that's affecting all the human activities that they could be doing in their life. So it's just so, like, this is so important. Look, to affect human relations on local, regional, and global scales, influence postures and conduct of national security and defense agendas. If they can know more about the people, the population, then they know how to control it and what they need to do to get their, to get their agendas going. But you look at these, and then you look at what targeted individuals saying, it adds up. So I mean, these people who say, oh, y'all are crazy or whatever, to look at this, that the Pentagon and the DoD, they know about neurotechnologies, they know about neuroweapons, they're researching and developing those neuroweapons. From what James Giordano is saying, it's a 100% that they are researching and developing remote neuroweapons. So affect human activities on an individual, group, or population levels. How are they going to do that without experimenting on human beings? How are they going to know how to affect human activities on an individual level if they are not experimenting with it? So it's just super 100% concrete when he talks that that they are experimenting on human beings all over the world with these neuroweapons.
If in fact this gives me some insight to the way people interact, inclusive of the way they may interact in bellicose, aggressive, violent, and volatile ways. And it also confers upon me certain powers to be able to influence that, alter that, change that, mitigate that. Then clearly I'm able to use the brain sciences, as we have tried repeatedly in the past, to influence the postures and capabilities not only of our own individuals who are engaged in warfare, intelligence, and national security operations, but those who seek to threaten us. In other words, we can utilize these things in national security, intelligence, and defense. Please look at the timeline. A mere 10 years ago, 2008, the National Academy of Sciences National Research Council convened a group to create a report dedicated to if and why and how brain sciences might be viable, valid, and of value in national security, intelligence, and defense operations. And in 2008, they did a 5-year retrospective and came to the conclusion that although...
Okay, I don't want to stop it too much, but the 2008 National Academy of Sciences report was a lie. Neuroweapons and directed energy weapons and, remote neural monitoring was being used way before that, experimenting on citizens in the United States and around the world. So, they have to put out these things to the public, and, all of the military who don't have the clearances to know that the experimentation is going on, saying, hey, it's not viable for operational use yet. So the experimentation was going on, and I guess they just, when they say that it could be operational, I guess that means for them, well, we've got to experiment on more innocent people, because they were experimenting on innocent people way before 2008. Since at least since at least the 1950s. with actual implants and things like that. And then I think you had, like, from the 1970s onward, it started to be that they didn't have to use implants, and they could use actual unique brain waves that we have to latch onto those and then attack us, and then other things like nanoparticulates and nanotechnology.
These things may be valid. Their relative value at that particular time rendered them not ready for prime time play. Our group, working with others internationally, inclusive of the Nuffield Council in the UK, proceeded forward from 2008 and did a slightly deeper dive, looking at international capabilities, limitations, and delimitations in the brain sciences, and came to a very, very different set of conclusions. Not only were the brain sciences increasingly being considered, interested, and used for possibilities of national security, intelligence, and defense, but they would continue to be so as more and more countries internationally developing capabilities and the specialized agendas to be able to look into the brain and affect the brain. So much so that by 2014, the exact same committee reconvened and recognized at that time that the brain sciences indeed were ready and in operational prime time for warfare, intelligence, and national security agenda. In other words, it is valid, valuable, and already in operational play.
And now that's interesting, guys, because, you know, my targeting started way before 2014. However, I know a lot of targeted individuals who their targeting did start after 2014. So, you know, I think after 2014, when, you know, when the National Academies of Sciences said, hey, this is valuable, and it's already in operational use, and everybody that, you know, basically the National Academy of Sciences blessing that, hey, this is a valid thing and we need to start using it. I think they started grabbing in more targeted individuals to be experimented on. But they were already, you know, targeting many people. But I think this did cause a swell after 2014. I think there have been kind of explosions of them pulling in targeted individuals. I think after 2001, after September 11th, they started targeting more people. And then after President Obama started the Brain Initiative, then they started pulling in more people. And I think that was around 2008. So you got 2001 is a huge blow up period of pulling in more targeted individuals. Then you had 2008. Then you had, I think there was a 2012 or 2010 or 2012, but you had these certain points where they would just say, okay, and they'd start grabbing in more and more targeted individuals, never reducing the amount of people they're experimenting on, but always increasing the amount of people that they're experimenting on.
The brain is the current and future battle space, or at least one that can be leveraged in those ways to be able to create tremendous effect, fairly little investment engagement. In other words, what it allows us to do, assess the brain, access the brain, and affect the brain. Unapologetically repeat myself throughout this lecture to drive home this point with regard to these capabilities, because each and all have gravitas importance and operational leverageability. That said, what are these techniques and technologies that have rendered this capability, and if you will, geopolitical, military, and social power? Well, I have them here before you. Generalization, we can parse them down into two discrete domains. First, the assessment neurotechnologies that do exactly as the name would imply.
And you look at, guys, look right under interventional technologies. Interventional technologies. You got the second one, directed energy devices. Directed energy devices used to access, assess, and affect the brain and the nervous system. Number two in interventional technologies, directed energy devices. What are targeted individuals saying that we're being hit with? Directed energy weapons, DO weapons, and neuro weapons. It's right there. You know, it's right there.
Based upon various tools we can use to assess those structures and functions of the brain that may be involved in those processes of cognition, emotion, and behavior. Humans are tool users. Rarely, however, do we turn over a rock, look around a corner, or peer under the bed just to know what's under there. We use, at very, very least, the knowledge we have gained from turning the rock over and looking under the bed around the corner.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I've been stopping it a lot. But you also see under interventional technologies, you see transcranial neuromodulation. Now that's like transcranial stimulation. That's why I'm looking into that direct cranial stimulation, because one of the protocols for this, like one of the protocols for our attackers messing with our brain, messing with our emotions, messing with our visual cortex, is transcranial, is like putting a frequency of directed energy across the skull so that it affects the brain. So if we can do that direct cranial stimulation with counter frequencies, which I'm going to get on. I've just been feeling so hard. I've been not lazy, but it's been hard to get anything done, and I'm really going to be experimenting with that, with some positive frequencies to do with direct cranial stimulation. And it at least takes one of these things that our attackers, one of these what do you call it? One of these oh gosh, having a hard time with words, but I guess one of the ways that they do remote neural monitoring, or they do remote neural manipulation, it would pull that away from our attackers. It would take that one out of the running. If we could do direct cranial stimulation and counter that, anything that they're doing transcranially to us. Now, I think they do things at different levels, so it may not stop all the remote neural manipulation, but it would at least take away one of the protocols that they do use.
And very often those things that we find under the rock, under the bed, or around the corner become tools for us to use in a variety of other engagements. Brain science, like any other science and technology, is no different. Earlier in the day at lunch, Major and I had a conversation about the viability of different types of research. Science for science's sake. Science just to know, because that's where your interests lie. Oh, look, I've been an academic for well over 4 decades. And I can tell you that that kind of research is wonderful. When that research is generated for a purpose, and when it's funded, and when that purpose deals with those things that are near and dear, the health, survivability, flourishing and protection of kith and kin, that research is operational research that has an end goal of use. This is what this is about. It's not just a question of trying to figure out what makes the brain tick in the way it's built. It's, can we get in there to affect the ticking and talking, and by affecting the way that brain is built and the way it functions, influence in ways that are kinetic and non-kinetic the attitudes, beliefs, thoughts, emotions, activities, and relative vulnerabilities and predispositions of those individuals for whom both we are responsible in terms of our own forces, perhaps to make them better, more insulated against injury, operationally protected and enhanced, and those who may threaten us.
And now the targeted individuals are the beta testing for those individuals that would be a threat. You know, that's one of the angles of this, and I just you know, it's horrifying. Yeah, I wanted to say something else about what he just said. I kind of forgot. Let's keep going. Maybe I'll remember it.
To do that, we need to intervene. So the other dimension of these neurotechnologies are interventional neurotechnologies. Now, I'm not going to bring you down the rabbit hole into what each and all of these things do, because you don't want to be a neuroscientist, and I'm certainly not going to make you a neuroscientist in an hour. But I think it becomes important to dial into a little bit more clarity and with further granularity what we're really talking about when we talk about these relative assessment and interventional technologies. In the former case, probably the one that gives the most rise to both provocation and contention, are various forms of neuroimaging, the ability to image the living.
Okay, guys, I remember what I wanted to say, and I just forgot it again. Oh wow. I need to be using Dave Case's CD more, because it doesn't allow for my attackers to mess with my short-term memory so much. Oh, I wanted to say, you know, I know that a lot of targeted individuals say, you know, oh, they know everything about the brain and the nervous system already, so the experimentation is over, blah, blah, blah. That is not true. That's not true, because you heard him say that they want to be able to access and know things about people's personality, know things about their belief, know what they can do to kind of control or affect them in their nervous system and their brain. And that means doing it to many cultures, many age groups, many different regions and things like that, to experiment on a wide variety of personalities, a wide variety. And so just knowing generally about the brain and the nervous system, yeah, they're done with that. They're still doing those things on each individual, but it's more about learning all these different cultures and how to affect them, different religions, how to affect them, how to extremize faith or to dull faith, in different regions, how people live differently. So it's about accessing and controlling and manipulating many different cultures, many different personalities. So that's a thing that the experimentation is not over. It's not over, and they keep pulling in more targeted individuals. And now experimentation isn't the only angle in this. I understand that, but it's one of the very important ones. I think it's the centerpiece. I think that if they weren't going to get any kind of information from experimentation, and they weren't going to learn how to control people, and it was just to torture people, and they were really just learning how to torture people, they wouldn't be able to do it. The people who are like, okay, well, this is so important, and we can sacrifice these people because it makes these weapons stronger, it makes our nation stronger, they'd be like, we're just torturing people. See, they have to get people in. Some of these people, weren't psychopaths before they started working with these weapons and stuff like that. They have to have this justification, like, this is so important, it can do so much for our military, that's why we're doing research and development on it. Which is it's totally evil, and I'm not justifying anything they do. But some of the people who are actually using these weapons, they need that justification of knowing that they're actually doing something important for their country, which is sick. And some of them just like torturing people. So, you do have those.
Brain, be able to see what brain areas are differentially active as we engage in thoughts, feelings, emotions, and tasks, and to then correlate the interaction of those nodes and networks with discrete patterns that occur not only in individuals, but in groups of individuals. In other words, if I can see how this gentleman's brain works, whether he's awake or falling asleep, I'm gonna catch him. The idea there is that I can then understand, I'm only kidding, I can understand better, not only what makes him happy, agitated, engaged, or tired, but I can then in some way alter my discourse to be able to make him feel happier, more engaged, and less tired. In so doing, I can take the information I have about the way.
That goes the other way too, guys. And as we know, as targeted individuals, say we're feeling energetic, happy, hopeful. So they know they can say, okay, well, he's energetic, hopeful, and what was the other one I said? But positive. We're feeling positive, feeling energetic. How do we make him feel less energetic, less hopeful, more doubtful? Those are the things they're learning too. So anytime he says something that we can make somebody feel less tired, and we can give them more strength, it goes the opposite. It's dual use. Goes the negative way and goes the positive way. And they are studying both. And I think for most targeted individuals who are speaking out, for us, they're doing all the negative stuff. They're learning all the negative stuff, how to turn everything about us that's positive, trying to, now I'm not saying they're succeeding 100% on us, but trying to make everything positive about us and turn it negative. If we're very hopeful people, they want to, they want to put doubt into our minds. They want to make us feel doubt. If we're energetic, they want to zap our energy. If we really like people, they want to make us distrust people and not like people. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
The way your brain works, and I can put it to good use, practical use. Think about this. I know what makes you tick as an individual, and I'm then able to generate patterns of how you as an individual relate to, are similar to, or different from other individuals. I may be able to then generate information that allows me to interact with you on ways that are more meaningful to our level of interaction. In other words, the more I know about what makes you tick, the more my interactions can be geared with you, make you tick the way I want you to. Obviously, it takes some energy to put people into a big magnet and scan their brain. There's a whole bunch of things that are limitations of brain imaging. We recognize that. That's part of the mission. We seek to delimit those particular constraints, and through the use of co-registered different forms of neuroimaging, make it better. Some of these forms of neuroimaging are fieldable, operationalizable in field missions. Some of them are not. We're seeking to make these things more operationalizable, not only for military medicine to assess individuals who may have incurred brain injury and/or the effects of brain injury, inclusive of things like PTSD and other forms of neuropsychiatric disorders, but also to understand better how it is that our individuals are able to think through certain situations, how their brains work, and be able to classify those individuals perhaps specify the way we train them, the way we sustain that training, that we maximize their performance.
The other way with us, they want to learn as much about us, what type of personality, how strong are we, you know, what's our patterns of fighting and defense and doing things that fight against us. Then they know better that to place us into how do we attack them? How exactly do we attack them to bring them down, to hurt their life, to hurt their family, you know, to do awful things to their life? How do we specifically attack this personality that we're learning stuff about? We're learning about how they feel. They're learning about what really hits us the hardest, and then they go for those things. It helps them to understand where the places to attack.
As well, genetics, biomarkers, information. That information is critical. One of the things you must learn is as military personnel, your demographic, biological, social, and psychological information exists in your jacket. It is in fact retrievable in real time. That information becomes ever more important as we try to understand the you-ness of you. The nature to classify that information, hold that information secure, doesn't only exist on the medical side with regard to your HIPAA records, but increasingly is becoming a concern for national security. When these large-scale, big databases, brain structure and function, physiology, biopsychosocial demographics, become ever more available and ever more relevant. What's making you tick, making you talk, what's making you strong, what's making you vulnerable. The fact that other nations, inclusive of China, Russia, are engaging in large-scale neuro big data initiatives to be able to create large-scale databases that can join not only imaging and physiological, but as well as other forms of phenotypic and genetic data of the entirety of populations, renders great power because there's great capability in that information to know where key points of strength and vulnerability may lie, and also to intercede, to inject information to in some way be able to affect what appears to be your medical record, your personal record, the evidence that is you. And we can take that step to go one step further. The more I know about you, and the more I know about the way your brain works as individuals, groups, communities, even populations, the more I can utilize non-kinetic means, such as informational means, narratives, iconographies, semiotics, to influence your emotions and your behaviors. We can do this subliminally through computer images. We can do this more liminally through the types of engagement interactions that we engage in psychological operations and informational operations. We can train better our human terrain teams to be able to interact with individuals in a variety of cultures, groups, settings, and ecologies.
So I just want to give you all an example of that. You know, like I'm a very strong-willed person, which I'm sure a lot of you guys are too. I have a lot of hope and I never give up. Like everything in my life, you know, Crohn's disease, it was just a challenge to beat. And so what I have been getting, and I think especially at night when I sleep, is I get neuro-linguistic programming saying, this is too much, I'm tired, I want to quit, things like that. So they're working on these things that give me strength. They're working on ripping those things down with subliminal messaging, you know, some of the V2K directly, but they're seeing those strengths in me that I never give up no matter how bad I feel and stuff. So they're like, okay, well, physically we can't torture him enough to make him stop. So we need to get in there. We need to do some neuro-linguistic programming, some subliminals to really make him feel a certain way. And you know, I think if they did that for a week, on people as strong as us, they did it for a week, hey, no problem. We would just feel a little bit bad. It would not affect us. But when they do it for year after year after year after year, even the strongest mind can be affected by some of these things. And we have to figure out, you know, willpower and faith and praying and just meditation and just pumping yourself up and talking to people that you love. Those are good things, but I think we need some more concrete tools of lifting ourselves up and making us get back to that strength that we had before, you know. And I think we do that in a lot of ways. We fight, but I'm just thinking we need better things to build us up. We need some very concrete things, and I'm going to be working on that. You know, well, I have been working on that pretty much the whole time, and I'll be working a lot harder.
To improve their performance, so as to be less distancing and more ameliorating. We can go further than that as well. We can also utilize these interventional technologies in those ways that may able to directly affect the brain. Probably the one that you've heard about most recently, most contemporarily in the literature, the possibility to use some form of directed energy to affect physiology peripherally and also to affect the physiology and health of the brain.
All right, there you go. So it's possible to use some form of directed energy to affect physiology and to affect the brain. What are targeted individuals saying? We're being hit with DO weapons. It's torture. It's messing with my emotions. It's messing with my brain. Let's hear it again.
About most recently, most contemporarily in the literature, is the possibility to use some form of directed energy to affect physiology peripherally and also to affect the physiology and health of the brain. Case in point here, U.S. Embassy personnel in Havana, possibly in China.
There you go.
And of course, there's not a lot that I can tell you about that, although I am one of the researchers on that particular project. But this seems to be wholly indicative in some.
Not a lot he can tell them about all that, because it would get into remote neural stimulation, remote neural manipulation, but he is a researcher on those projects. What does that mean? I think he means that he's a researcher on trying to figure out exactly what they were hit with and exactly why. I mean, it just sounds weird when he says it. But why can't he speak about that? Why can't he speak about that? Because it goes into how other countries in our country are doing this to random people, to innocent people, to either research and develop or to run psyops. You know, some of those Cuban embassy workers were, I think they were actually CIA. They were actually working for the CIA. So Cuban intelligence or Russian intelligence or whoever was running psyops and trying to figure out what they knew. You know, and I think it was Cuban intelligence. I think maybe Russia was kind of maybe giving them technology to do it, either Russia or China. I actually think Russia, more along the lines of Russia probably, but I think that was Cuban intelligence running psyops and doing remote neural monitoring and remote neural manipulation on those embassy workers and many other people that enter Cuba, not just embassy workers, but just regular tourists who come and stay at a certain hotel.
The fact that this was at least some form of directed energy, whether it was wholly intentional or not, still remains to be definitively decided. However, the pattern of insult and injury to those individuals and the pattern of injury of who was affected strongly suggests that this was an intentional and directed engagement, and that this represents a beta test, possible probe of a directed energy neuroweapon. And there are a number of countries that have developed initiatives and agenda towards developing just these types of things, the United States included.
Listen to that, guys, and let's hear it again. That is a direct admittance. A direct admittance that they have to be experimenting on innocent civilians non-consensually. What he just said is so important. So let's hear it again. Where are we? We're at 1641. Let's just hear it again.
And of course, there's not a lot that I can tell you about that, although I am one of the researchers on that particular project. But this seems to be wholly indicative and supportive of the fact that this was at least some form of directed energy, whether it was wholly intentional or not, still remains to be definitively decided. However, the pattern of insult and injury to those individuals and the pattern of injury of who was affected strongly suggests that this was an intentional and directed engagement, and that this represents a beta test, possible probe of a directed energy neuroweapon.
A possible probe of a directed energy neuroweapon. So that's what he said, right? And then right after, what does he say? It says a probe of a directed energy neuroweapon, a specific directed energy neuroweapon. Now listen to what he says.
There are a number of countries that have developed initiatives and agenda towards developing just these types of things, the United States included.
So he's saying the United States is developing these things to probe with directed energy neuroweapons. Now, line that up with what we are saying. The people watching this in the chat room right now and me, we are saying we're being hit with neuroweapons. We're being remote neural manipulated. The United States is working to research and develop. He just said that. This guy who is an advisor to the Pentagon and all those other things, and he's part of the European Brain Project, he says the United States is working on directed energy neuroweapons, probing people's minds, beta testing. He's saying it on this thing right now, and it is an admittance of it. That's why I listened to the first 10 minutes of this. This is great. Let's continue, guys.
But you also have a whole host of other things that can go bump and bang in your brain. The more we understand the specificity of the brain on a very granular level, the more we're able to derive and develop particular types of drugs that not only can enhance and optimize the performance of our people, but can also be used to mitigate, militate, and in some cases manifest profound morbid changes in their people. In other words, against the hostile other. Drugs can be exceedingly specific, and as I'll show you in a moment, can be very, very much used to individualize weaponology in terms of what we call precision pathology or precision effect. We can go further. Clearly, one of the things we can also do is transcranial neuromodulation, the idea of going through the skull to modulate the node network activity of the brain, to optimize the performance of key individuals in certain tasks and performances that are relative to their missional space. And we can also do that against hostile or perhaps belligerent others. We can go further to implant certain brain-machine interfaces. These are many of the DARPA programs that you may hear of now. Probably the one that is most notorious, in a very good sense, is something called the N3 program, which is the non-invasive neurosurgical neuromodulation program being run by their program manager, Dr. Al Mundy. The idea here is to put minimal-sized electrodes in a network within a brain through only minimal intervention to be able to read and write into the brain function in real time, remotely. The United States is not alone in such efforts. And then, of course, you also have the things that are a little bit more traditional. If we talk about things that can be operable in the biochemical space, we ordinarily talk about drugs, bugs, toxins, and ever more, we're considering devices. The last Biological Toxins and Weapons Convention, RevCon, it was then raised by the Australia group that we need to be a little bit more salient in our attention to those possible neurotechnological devices that may be able to be weaponized. Our group has also argued that the current considerations, extant categories of the Biological Toxins and Weapons Convention are not detailed enough to be able to appreciate or keep pace with the advances in this form of science that can be weaponized and pose a risk and threat on the battle space. So, how then can we use these elements as weapons, means of contending against others? Formal definition of a weapon, right under the Oxford Old English Dictionary. Means of contending against others. And we can do that in a number of ways. We can militate their behaviors and their thoughts in some ways as to make them more amenable to what we do, the idea of positive weaponology. Or we can, in fact, mitigate and in some cases completely nullify their capability, will, or engagement to fight.
Now, let me tell you something, guys, because what he just said, to mitigate and sometimes completely stop their ability to fight. I want to tell you all a story real quick. The other day, I went to the grocery store, and I was coming out, and I had like a left turn. I had the arrow was green, and so I took a left turn, and this guy like started honking at me. He was going to take a right, but I had the right of way, and so he comes up to my car and he starts like, he was like shaking his fist at me and yelling at me and everything like that. And I looked over at him and I go, I'm going to call the cops. I just started yelling at him because I had the right of way. I was like, I had the right of way. I'm going to call the cops. Shut up, you know. And we had a yelling fight on the road. And after that yelling fight, I didn't feel anything. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't beating fast. There was no adrenaline release in my system. And whenever I've ever had an argument with anybody or things have gotten heated or anything like that, my hands start shaking, my heart starts beating, the adrenaline starts to flow, right? Well, it seems like with my attacks, my attackers have been doing something with remote neural manipulation where they're screwing up my thyroid and basically like messing with the function so that I don't have any adrenaline. Now think about that. If you can affect the brain, you can do remote neural manipulation to make somebody not be able to use their adrenaline or to drain their adrenaline, then you've got somebody that's going to have a hard time fighting. They're going to be so tired that they're having a hard time. And that is what my attackers are doing. They're whittling me down in all these ways with remote neural manipulation so that I can't pump myself up, you know, to fight. I still continue to, and I will beat it. But I just wanted to give that example because what he was saying, and I think y'all could probably, you know, everybody in the chat room could probably think of an example of something that your attackers do, making you tired, you know, torturing you all the time, you know, V2K 24 hours a day so that you can't think. Those things, they're trying to immobilize us and stop us from fighting. You know, they want to immobilize us so that we're easier targets for the gang stalking, and we're easier targets and we're isolated, you know, for them to do their research and development, for them to do their torture tactics and psyops on us.
combine those two definitions into one, what you find is those agents that will either change individuals' thoughts, vulnerabilities, volatility to violence and aggression, or incur morbidity, dysfunction, and or mortality in such a way as to then mitigate the engagement altogether. So with me?
Look at what they are trying to do with these neuroweapons. Look at the goals. Every goal that he talks about, if you talk to a targeted individual, you can be like, oh, that's their goal with neuroweapons. That's their goal with directed energy weapons. And then look at what they're doing to us. And a picture becomes clear. Well, it should become clear to people who are not targeted individuals that this is happening. The targeted individuals' testimonies are concrete. We are telling the truth. This guy is confirming everything that targeted individuals ever say about what is happening to them. I mean, not everything. You know, some targeted individuals, their minds get so muddled, and sometimes they're wrong about certain things, even me. But, you know, the torture, the V2K, the remote neural manipulation, making us angry, making us our emotions angry, or making us lethargic, or making us fall asleep. It makes a lot of sense when James Giordano comes out and says, look, these are the goals. These are the goals, and he's an advisor to the Pentagon. So he's advising the Pentagon, and the Pentagon is trying to work on what do we want to do with these weapons. And then you see exactly what they're doing to targeted individuals line up with the exact goals that they're making. So I mean that is concrete 100% proof. And if it's not 100% concrete proof, somebody who's not a direct targeted individual like us, I think we're all targeted, on this globe. I think we're all targeted in some way. But these people who are not direct, if that does not solidify it, then I don't know what to tell you. You can't figure things out if you can't listen to this guy and then listen to targeted individuals and say, okay, that is going on, because they are trying to develop and advance these neuroweapons for specific goals, of what they want to do to the enemy or what they want to do to the population, which now in a lot of cases, if you're a certain part of the population with creative thinking, or you're not compliant, or you're a whistleblower, or I mean, it happened to me just by chance because of some medical issues and surgeries and stuff, that some people, they're whistleblowers and they want them to be silenced. They are the enemy. A lot of us have become the enemy. Even though we're just innocent Americans telling the truth or whatever, a tyrannical regime, a tyrannical hierarchy sees people who tell the truth as enemies. So, I mean,
we can break down any form of weaponology into two discrete categories: soft weapons and hard weapons. In the former categorization, soft weapons include but are not limited to such things like economic leveraging to create economics, market values, market presence at international bargaining tables to develop international power and leverage as a soft weapon. Clearly, the more we're able to make an impact in a field, in a dimension, by virtue of research, medicine, technology, infiltration to a variety of areas of the public space, the more we're able to yield economic strong-arming, economic leveraging. I think an important consideration that I'll reiterate later in this particular lecture is that there are countries outside the United States and or the West that are increasing their capabilities by intent in the brain sciences so as to be able to gain this type of economic leveraging in international global markets, in medicine, science, technology, and the military. Most notably among them is China. We'll talk more about that momentarily. We can also utilize weapons in more of a soft approach, as I mentioned.
Well, that's funny that he says China, because the United States is #1 in directed energy proliferation. They're #1 in this. The advancement of the weapons, and Israel is #2, then Russia, then China. So it's funny that he's like China especially, because it would be really, if he was telling the truth, it'd be America especially is working hardcore on doing all these things.
The more I know about what makes you tick, the more I might be able to do things like weaponize the approach that I then take towards you in my interactions and engagements with you. Here we can utilize the brain sciences for psychological operations. Most notably, one of the DARPA programs run by the program manager Bill Casebeer, Dr. Bill Casebeer, who subsequently went on to be a program manager at Lockheed Martin and run their brain-machine interfacing programs.
Oh, wow. He worked at DARPA, and then he went to Lockheed Martin, working on brain-machine interfaces. Wow.
The program was called Narrative Networks. And one component of the Narrative Networks project was something called neural narratives. If we understand how it is that brains
and the thing that he says, like, okay, this guy that was working on this project at DARPA, he immediately, after he finishes that project, he goes to Lockheed Martin, because Lockheed Martin is one of these contractors on the DoD who's doing further research and development and advancement of neuroweapons. So obviously that's the place he's going to go after DARPA, because then they're like, DARPA is taking things and they're like, okay, well, this works as a prototype, and then mass producing it. That's what they've mass manufactured these directed energy weapons. They've mass manufactured these remote platforms that they use. They've mass manufactured neuro weapons that they're using on targeted individuals and people all over the United States, all over England, all over Australia, all over New Zealand, you know, all over Germany, all over, you know, Russia, China, just everywhere. You know, this is proliferating everywhere. Canada, you guys know, just every, I mean, pretty much every country.
Those groups and populations respond to certain forms of imaging, memes, iconographies, engagements. The more we may be able to tailor those things through our psychological operations, propaganda, meso, to be able to engage these individuals in more positive ways or in ways that are more influential, to be able to direct their behaviors, their predispositions, and perhaps their engagements with us on a variety of levels, from the individual all the way up to the political. But then, of course, we move into the more harder forms of weapons, things such as bullets and bombs. Here, once again, let me reiterate what we're talking about on the neuro side, but drugs, bugs, toxins, and devices.
Drugs, bugs, toxins, and devices. And now this is where, this is why you hear so many targeted individuals saying, yeah, I kind of get hit with the weapons, but I'm also getting a lot of chemicals put into my home. My food's being poisoned. I even think they can do chemistry from afar. You know, I don't have much. I have extensive directed energy weapon attacks, extensive remote neural manipulation, just hardcore. I have some gang stalking, but it's not as bad as some other people. But hardcore directed energy weapons. That's why you'll hear some target individuals are like, well, my gang stalking is off the hook. I'm getting a little bit of the weapons, and I'm getting a lot of chemicals, because they're using all these different things: chemicals, biologicals, and devices. So there's many different protocols of where they're going to want to do more chemicals on a target to research the neurological effects, the physiological effects, and then kind of supplement it with you know, neuro weapons and directed energy weapons. And other people where it's like, I've gotten some chemicals, like maybe they put stuff in my fridge one time, you know, the stuff in chemtrails, and then that one house I got, you know, some chemicals put around my house, but it wasn't the main protocol. The main protocol was the directed energy weapon smashing my head in using the remote neural manipulation. But you see these hard weapons, that's why you see some target individuals who are getting a lot more of one thing and maybe less of another, or one target individual who's getting everything and one target individual who's getting more directed energy weapon attacks, because these are all different contractors working on different these different influencing and deterrencing tools, what he puts in as hard weapons.
But of course, if we spill over the idea of soft weaponology into a hard weaponization, we also see the use of...
And now wait, I'm sorry, I really do need to get it going, because it's kind of long and we're only at 22 minutes, but he's just saying so much important stuff. And I'm glad that I was like, well, I'll just do like 10 minutes of it on a video and then tell y'all to go watch it, tell everybody. But I just want to go through the whole thing, because I have a lot to say on this stuff. Now, you look at the soft weapons, right? Intelligence, psyops, meso, right? Well, even economic leverages. But think about what they're doing to targeted individuals. I mean, they're working on our economics, right? They're taking away our, you can't, I mean, I tried to work for as long as I could, but now I have to be on disability. So that's an economic leverage over me. They're gaining intelligence on me about what I'm doing, and doing the psyops, gang stalking, your neighbors doing, you know, noise campaigns and everything like that. So they're using soft and hard weapons on targeted individuals, mixing them all together to create these protocols and to get the information of how does this human being react. What are we finding out? You know, what on this personality, if we do this and we do that, it's effective. So if we ever meet another personality out there that's like this, we'll have a good idea of how to proceed. You know, how to proceed with, well, with what I'd say is evil. I mean, if they were trying to catch terrorists with this and that's it, I'd say, okay, yeah, that's great. You know, they're trying to catch bad guys with it. And if it was like actually, you know, people that we could trust and there was some oversight to it and people were using it correctly, I'd be like, wow, this is powerful. And it's a powerful tool for good. But the way that they're doing it, I want to say how they proceed with their evil. How they proceed with their evil, because they are attacking innocent citizens just to test this stuff out. Like, our lives mean nothing. We can be eaten for the state, eaten for the military-industrial complex, you know?
Data as a viable weapon. Manipulating biodata so that I can then put into your particular medical records subtle information that may change the disposition of whether you're sick or not, change how you're treated, influence the postures that go to you in terms of insurance, care, viability for military service. By altering that information, by changing those data, by purloining those data, I essentially change the you of you. And I can do that in very subtle and insidious ways. Furthermore, I can do that on a variety of different levels that can affect key individuals so that, in fact, your medical record changes to thereby render you incapable or at least invalid to be able to serve in a way you've served. Or I can do that on a much larger scale, groups, populations. And if I change those data, I change the way you're being regarded and treated. And I can do that in one of two ways. I can do it in such a way that you're going to be regarded in a negative sense, or I can do it in such a way that I'm going to treat you incorrectly. If I say, for example, you have a particular allergy, or you have particular sensitivities, or you have a particular disorder, you will be treated for that. And that could then harm your health and your stability, both a short wars approach as well as a long wars approach. But if we take a look at this in a little more detail, you can see that once again it folds back to the idea of what can we do to ours and what can be done to others. Clearly, one dimension, one domain of operational viability and value is to enhance the capabilities of the combat and intelligence operator across a range of scalabilities in both general purpose and more select forces. This is the idea of neuro-enablement. Neuro-enablement. You will hear this referred to in a variety of different ways. Performance optimization, enhancement, enablement.
Well, so I mean, if he has a saying, I mean, this new terminology, neuro-enablement, for the positive affecting, for the positive remote neural manipulating of soldiers and people on their side, I guess. Or I mean, then we need to take that term and say neuro-disablement, because that's what they're doing to targeted individuals. They're trying to disable us neurologically, you know, to do what they want to do, just to make us feel how they want us to feel.
Maximization. These terms mean something. A number of years ago, our group was tasked with the Air Force to develop a lexicon, a nomenclature that would be able to define these in more precise ways. I'm not going to bore you with that now. But the idea of enablement gives forth, I think, a particular meaning that's relevant. You're enabling individuals to do some aspects of a performance of a task that is germane and justified to their operational mission, and that is, in fact, done with regard to protection of their charges. So in other words, we're saying, we're going to make you good to go, and we've decided that this is good. The reason this can become problematic, of course, is that what definition of good are we using? What we define, whoever the proverbial we may be, to be good, might be quite different than what they, whoever the proverbial they is. And as a consequence, we have to keep a much broader window of opportunity and possibility open to be aware of the potential benefits, burdens, and risks that this type of engagement may pose. What types of things can we do to make our people better, if you will? Well, certainly we can use a variety of advanced psychopharmacologics and neuropharmacologics, in other words, drugs. And I refer you to a wonderful book written by a colleague of mine, Professor Jonathan Moreno, called Mind Wars. First edition came out in 2006, second edition came out in 2012. And Professor Moreno does a very good job in defining and explaining the history and historicity of the way that brain and cognitive sciences had been used in national security, intelligence, and defense operations, both by the United States and more globally. And what we see is that this is certainly not a new event. We can look back into antiquity and see that there have been attempts to try to maximize the performance, capability, sustainability, and protection of those individuals who are operational warfighters, literally from ancient Rome and Greece all the way to the 20th and now 21st century. The tools and techniques based upon the understanding and depth that we have that increases the granularity and specificity of effect and increases sophistication and gravitas of outcome. The more we know about the brain, the more we can develop ever more selective agents to affect the structures and functions of the brain in cognition, emotion, and actions. And the more we can do so in a way that's more like sharpshooting rather than buckshotting. But irrespectively, drugs can be somewhat dirty. What I mean by that is they can have a host of adverse effects, some of them side effects, some of them direct effects. And very often what we'll find is that unless we're able to deliver the drugs directly to a particular site in the brain or elsewhere in the nervous system, they can have heterogeneity of effects throughout the body. That can lead us to something.
You know, but the neurotechnologies and the directed energy weapons can also have horrible effects on the brain and the physiology. I mean, because my attackers are trying to mess with my memory, they're trying to mess with my visual cortex. I'm sure a lot of you guys, you know, they're messing with your emotion and stuff. But it's also, it's like a stream of electromagnetic frequencies going towards the brain. You know, microwaves going into the brain. So it's not like it's just going to be like, oh, whatever effect they decide to do to the brain, it's going to overwhelm the brain with electromagnetic frequency stimulation, which burns our brain out, you know, and burns our nervous system out. I think that's the one thing that I suffer from maybe the most is just burning out of my nervous system and my brain, because they're pumping electromagnetic signals to my brain, to my nervous system all day long, every day, 24 hours a day. So you're going to get adverse effects with neurobiologicals, but you're also going to get very adverse effects with 24-hour a day, year to year to year neuroweapons, neuroweapons administration, or administering neuroweapons on a person, attacking somebody with neuroweapons.
Undesirable outcomes. But we don't need to be limited to drugs. No. We can also use a variety of computational brain-machine interfaces that are both closed and open loop. And these include things like transcranial magnetic and electrical stimulation, stimulating the vagus nerve transdermally, or if you wanted to get somewhat more invasive, but certainly more specific,
stimulating the vagus nerve. And how much do I talk about that all the time, guys? My attackers remote neural manipulate, and it's been like more than 18 years. Like eight years ago, I knew that I was being tortured, but I had extensive problems on the left side of my body for the 10 years before that. So I have been, my vagus nerve has been manipulated for like 18 years. So, I mean, that's why they can do all this extensive remote neural manipulation with me. And you heard what he said, stimulation of the vagus nerve. It's a very important part of this. That's why I want you guys to, that's why I want you guys to ground your left leg, because your vagus nerve goes down through your left leg all the way to the bottom of the foot. And a lot of us, and I'm not sure if it's all of us, but it's a common protocol by our attackers to use that vagus nerve on the left side to then affect everything, because you've got every nerve in the body coming off of that vagus nerve to every part, to your heart, to your lungs, to your groin, to your brain on the left side. Everything important is that vagus nerve is the biggest nerve in your body. And nerves run off of it to every important part of your body. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Brain-machine interfaces by virtue of deep brain and superficial brain implants. I shall tell you that one of the leading projects in developing state-of-the-art brain implants is a DARPA-funded project aimed at the medical side for the treatment of neurological and neuropsychiatric spectrum disorders. And this program is called SubNets, Systems-Based Neurotechnologies for Emerging Therapies. What you also need to appreciate is that DARPA program, like any program that is oriented towards engaging brain function to then alter those functions in certain ways, directional ways, can be harnessed for what's called dual use. Medical purposes that are then depurposed to medicine and used for other agenda, inclusive of warfighter enablement and enhancement. Furthermore, we understand that there are a number of nations outside the United States, some of whom are allied, others that are at least competitive, if not combative, that are engaged in these types of programs, looking at the capability for transcranial and deep intracranial modulation of brain function to improve the functional performance of military and intelligence operators across a range of viable missional tasks. We are not alone in these pursuits, and I think that's something that needs to be appreciated. But it's not just a question of what we can do to our own, because very often in raising these questions, we tend to, what I call, err on the side of moral probity, and we recognize that there are particular limitations, limits, boundaries, thresholds that cannot and perhaps should not be crossed in terms of what we can do. And if we intend to cross them, we only cross them with consent, and that consent is highly contingent upon the necessity of a continuity of research and clinical care.
Now, you guys tell me, somebody who's an advisor to the Pentagon, his colleagues worked at DARPA, he's an advisor to the Pentagon, he's working on the BRAIN initiative in Europe. You think that he doesn't know that there's non-consensual human experimentation going on? Because I do not. I think that he knows. Maybe he doesn't agree with it. Maybe he doesn't agree with it, and that's why he's on the board of that human experimentation board. But like what he's saying now, he knows that there's human experimentation. So why isn't he speaking out about it? I mean, he's basically telling us that it has to be going on with what he's saying, but it's such a confusion how he starts talking about ethics, and you know that he knows that there's non-consensual human experimentation, and he's saying, oh, well, it has to be consensual. So, I mean, why doesn't he come out and say these things if he really believes in ethics, in neuroethics, and that this should only be with consent? Why does he not come out and speak out against this? I mean, that's evil. If he does believe it's wrong, he definitely knows about it. He needs to come out and tell people.
Understanding what happens to the individual once they've been enabled and enhanced, and what may happen when they're no longer enabled and enhanced. In other words, more colloquially, when Superman goes back to being Clark Kent, what happens to Clark becomes the burden and obligation of our responsibility. However, those ethics are not homogeneous on the world stage.
Okay.
The idea of pushing the envelope of what can be done to the combat, warfighter, intelligence operator, and perhaps more broadly, to those individuals who may oppose particular regimes and or may be military fighters against your own regime, is very often bounded by, and in some cases deconstricted by philosophies, cultures, and ethics of those individuals who may be competitive, if not combative to us. So in other words, this can also be weaponized against others. This is where we get into the idea of novel neuroweapons. Once again, this is not necessarily new, but the momentum of this dimension of the field has accelerated as a consequence of increased understanding of the brain and increased capability to develop tools and techniques to access and affect the brain. So what are we seeing here? Well, take a look. We see in-close neuropharmaceuticals and organic toxins. What's new about this is the in-close nature of this. Increasingly, we're not seeing these things as weapons of mass destruction against gross aspects of the population, although certainly many neuroweapons such as sarin gas and VX and other forms of neurotoxic agents can be leveraged against large groups of people, but that's messy. More specifically, perhaps, might be targeting individuals on a level that allows either direct attribution or covert engagement with non-attribution. Let me give you an example of what I mean. So this gentleman is the leader of some group, political group, social group, a combative group, and under the veil of a white flag, he and I are now to have some kind of a caucus, a meeting. During that meeting, what I do is I lace the rim of his drink, or his pen, or his seat, or something in his immediate environment with very, very low dose drug or toxins that are going to affect his stability. They may affect the way his brain works, and as a consequence of that, they can affect the functions of his brain, his thought patterns, his relative emotionality, and the behaviors that go along with that. One of two things might happen. He might be completely incapacitated as a consequence of this, or he may change his level of capacity and engagement so that he went into the meeting thinking, I hate this guy's my enemy. He walks out of the meeting going, I love this guy is great. Now what could happen? If in fact this is a gentleman who has charismatic, financial, elected, or dictatorial power, it may be that his followers will then follow him blindly. He came into the meeting as a leader of those followers who were bellicose, were volatile, were violent and aggressive. He comes out of the meeting and he tells them to change their behaviors, and they do. Or I could sever the trust. By now, he leaves this meeting, he's espousing a very different philosophical stance and orientation, and his followers no longer adhere to his precepts, his tenets, or his lead, and I fractured the relative arrangement of trust.
Okay, guys, I just want to check and make sure my live stream's still going on, because they'll give me warnings. Okay, I can show that. I can show this video, no problem. I was just thinking they had already maybe shut down the live stream. Okay.
Engagement, capability, leaving that population disrupted and vulnerable to intervention, to a coup d'etat, to a junta, to some type of insertive reassumption of leadership. See how this can work? Furthermore, I can use this very tactically. Some of these agents allow me to assemble the agent on site and not have to stockpile it, which allows me to take the components of this agent into and out of a country relatively covertly, target a specific individual, change or eliminate that individual with very little attribution and trace, be able to leave prior to any attribution. Think Novichok. Or I could assemble very small quantities of this that would then allow a specific intervention, characteristically in a place that would not allow such an intervention. Think of the use of a derivative of Vx in an airport. But I could do more than that. I could also incur much broader type of ripple effects. One of the ways I could also do that is with what's called high morbidity neuromicrobiologic agents. It's a real fancy way of saying neurobugs. But high morbidity neurobugs. I may not want to kill a lot of people. In fact, arguably, I may assume what is sometimes referred to as the Sailor-Malin mantra. Those of you who may be fans or students of military history, you may remember that Sailor-Malin, Wing Commander Sailor-Malin, was a South African who flew with the Royal Air Force during the Second World War. He became well known during the Battle of Britain for shooting up German airplanes, but letting them limp whole, particularly bomber aircraft. And they would ask Sailor-Malin, "Oh, Wing Commander, why didn't you shoot that plane down?" And his adage was simple. Better to have that plane return home with wounded crew who are spitting up their lungs, one dead crewman that they had to attend to and therefore divert their missional capability while in flight, than shoot them down. Because the psychological effect will be rippling and devastating. This is sometimes referred to as the Malin effect. What can I do? I can use a particular bug that I may be able to now modify through the use of gene editing technique that is ubiquitously available and fairly easy to use to take a bug that was previously relatively benign and non-pathogenic and make that bug virulent, pathogenic, dangerous. And then what could I do? I could introduce that bug in key sites. Des Moines, Seattle, Tampa, Newark, Houston. I get a few people sick. I do it on an airplane, do it at an airport, do it at a sporting event, do it on Black Friday. And then what I would do is I would take credit for that, but I'd want to make sure that at least part of the symptomatic constellation was not only neurological, profoundly psychological. Agitation, debilitation, sweating, stomach problems, sleeplessness, cardiac problems, things that are what we call top-down neurological in their effect, brain to body and body to brain, in the bottom-up cascade. Then what I would do is I would get on the internet, and I would put out over the internet, I did it. Oh yes, I'm that dangerous G group that you should all be afraid of. And in fact, this is far more ubiquitous than I let on. These are only the first cases. I've let these buggies go all over the country, and your early warning signs are agitation, anxiety, worry, sleeplessness, stomach problems, heart problems. What have I done? Rippled the sheets of the worried well. At first blush, I get every hypochondriac running to their physician. At second and third blush, I get those individuals who begin to become worried that they may have been exposed to this, that their children may have been exposed to this, that their loved ones, their kin, their kith may have been exposed to this. Of course, the physicians, the CDC, the Public Health Service comes back and says, no, that's not what's going on. I get back on the internet. I say, oh, don't you listen to that. That's fake. That's false. Your government knows what's going on. They can't do anything about it, and they can't treat you. They're going to end up quarantining you. How many people would I need to afflict? Somewhere between 12 and 240? What would be the effect? Hang on, folks. Within 41 to 45 days, we crash the United States public health system. Crash it. In so doing, I render the United States infrastructure vulnerable, either there or elsewhere. See the ripple effect? The disruptive effect? I can disrupt an individual from the level of their cell to their system, and disrupt individuals on a variety of levels, from individuals all the way up to the social fabric. And that social fabric may go even further. It may be geopolitical. And you need to think just for a moment, if you could, why would it be of any value at all to affect, disrupt, and disable individuals who are U.S. Embassy personnel in Havana? When did it happen? What was happening? What would be the benefit in fracturing a growing economic, political, and social trust in that part of the world? Who would benefit? What would be the long-term effects, for example, of at least indicating that U.S. embassy personnel, foreign service personnel, are vulnerable to these types of threats? Could you, in fact, pair the threat with some type of conditioned stimulus? So now what you're able to do is evoke a response in the worried well. I only offer possible suggestions, your speculation, and your consideration.
I wonder because it screwed up Cuban relations with America so badly. And I wonder if he's saying, you know, Cuba wanted that or another player like Russia. I'm not sure what he was inferring there.
We can even go further. One of the newest developments is that nanoparticulate matter can be stabilized for distribution. Not aware what nanoparticulate matter is. It's that matter which exists on a scale of 1 × 10⁻⁹. Very, very small. Smaller than a cell. And we can manufacture materials that have discrete properties that can be controlled by virtue of bioengineering and their physical chemistry. Auto-aggregate, be able to aggregate in particular areas based upon their biological and or chemical sensitivity.
To aggregate and go through the blood-brain barrier, going specifically to the brain.
Now we go one step further. Most recently, just a few weeks ago, it was announced that you could then aerosolize nanomaterials. And go one step further, I can create small...
What did he just say a few weeks ago? Because they've been chemtrailing all over the globe for, you know, since 2000, right? Since before 2000, in the 2000s. And had been aerosoling nanoparticulates and nanotechnology for probably about that long or longer. Just funny how he says, and we just figured this out. And they've been doing it for like decades and decades.
Robotic units, controllable robotic units at the nanoscale, and that these two can be aerosolized to create a nanoswarm of biopenetrable materials that you cannot see, that can penetrate all but the most robust biochemical filters, that are able to integrate themselves through a variety of membranes, mucous membranes, and wherever, mouth, nose, ears, eyes, can be then uptaken into the vascular system to create clumping, can affect the vascular system of the brain, or can directly diffuse into the brain space. These can be weaponized.
Or not even to create problems with vascularizing and clumping and stuff like that, but just to be there so that they can interact, they can be a catalyst for directed energy, for the directed energy from microwaves, so they can actually transmit, they can be transceivers for that energy.
Done in such a level that their presence is almost impossible to detect, and as such, the attribution becomes exceedingly difficult to demonstrate. How much of this material would I need? Take a look. This is the front of my pen. This amount of nanomaterial, if be able to maintain and sustain with regard to its deliverability and aerosolization, could in fact affect all of you.
Good God.
Where I come from, New York City. Look at this. Look at this. I'm carrying that material. See it? Would I have to lug a giant weapon into the room? No, I wouldn't. And what if, in fact, I utilize some form of an unmanned aerial device or unmanned ground device as a delivery vehicle? Something like a drone or a bug. Could I do something with that? But let's keep going. Could I also utilize a whole host of devices to be able to affect individuals close in, for example, during interrogations, during social engagements, during human terrain team engagements, or more remotely, in a room, in a theater, an airplane, bus, store, in a mall? The answer is increasingly yes. So this then represents for us both a challenge and an opportunity. The challenge is that increasingly what we find is that neuroscience and technology is relatively easy to obtain. Many of the things that I've just spoken to you about are viable and obtainable directly to the consumer or directly to the scientist. We also know that many of the products that are available direct to consumer can be easily modified to create things that have a much higher weaponization potential. But more than that, we also recognize that there are dedicated efforts on the part of nation states and even groups of non-state actors, and increasingly virtual nations that are using virtual currencies to fund research efforts in these areas. I'd like to think that I'm a smart guy talking to a bunch of very intelligent individuals, But let's face it, we're not the only smart people in the world. If we're thinking this way, there are plenty of other people who are thinking this way too. Some of them are our allies, some of them may be our competitors, and some of them are combatants and hostiles. And this is in fact the reality. Furthermore, we recognize that the goal, particularly among the actions of the United States and her allies, is to fight for right and honor, but to keep our own honor clean, to take the moral high ground, if you will. And indeed, that has been the case in the majority of the United States engagements throughout our history.
But not now. But not now. And okay, even throughout our history is a lie, because the United States has not taken the high road. They've done false flags. They've experimented on people, MK Ultra. So what he just said was a lie.
However, one of the things that may creep up here is that there's something of an abrogation, a prohibition, a proscription against engaging this type of research and its possible translation in the civilian sector.
There we go.
Earlier in the very nice introduction that Captain Bender afforded me, that I've had the opportunity to work with the European Union Human Brain Project, specifically as a task leader for dual-use brain science. One of the considerations that grew out of that was that absolutely none of those projects in the Human Brain Project, again, a multinational effort, can and should be uptaken into warfare, intelligence, and national security agenda. That's viable enough. The idea there is that these things should be used for only peaceful means. However, this also creates a challenge. And the challenge is simple. If in fact I choose not to train in particular ways, I choose not to train 3 days a week, if in fact those individuals who may choose to then conflict with me will then train in the ways that I do not, and train on the days of the week that I will not, they may opportunize a select advantage.
So what he's saying there, guys, is, you know, we want to be ethical, right? But if we're too ethical and we're not researching and developing this stuff, our enemies, like, I don't know, like China or North Korea, if they're working on this stuff and they're willing to do unethical things to advance their weaponry, then they're going to be more powerful and they're going to beat us. So this is the kind of shit, this is the kind of horse shit that they are telling, the people who are microwaving us, those maybe ex-military that hook up with these contractors. They're saying, we have to do this. We have to experiment on these innocent families, these innocent people that didn't do anything, because other countries that are our enemies are doing it. And if we don't do it, and advance these weapons, then we're going to be behind. And our whole country could be, there could be a threat coming to our country from those countries that will do it. So that's exactly what he's saying there. He's saying we are doing unethical experimentation with this stuff because other countries that we're scared of or we're at odds with, they're doing it. And so we have no choice. That's exactly what he just said, and we need to hear it again. Let's see, we're at 42:04. Let's listen to the last 2 minutes.
Easily modified to create things that have a much higher weaponization potential. But more than that, we also recognize that there are dedicated efforts on the part of nation states and even groups of non-state actors, and increasingly virtual nations that are using virtual currencies to fund research efforts in these areas. I'd like to think that I'm a smart guy talking to a bunch of very intelligent individuals, but let's face it, we're not the only smart people in the world. If we're thinking this way, there are plenty of other people who are thinking this way too. Some of them are our allies, some of them may be our competitors, and some of them are combatants and hostiles. And this is in fact the reality. Furthermore, we recognize that the goal, particularly among the actions of the United States and her allies, is to fight for right and honor, but to keep our own honor clean, to take the moral high ground, if you will. And indeed, that has been the case in the majority of the United States engagements throughout our history.
No.
However, one of the things that may creep up here is that there's something of an abrogation, a prohibition, a proscription against engaging this type of research and its possible translation in the civilian sector. You heard earlier in the very nice introduction that Captain Bender afforded me that I've had the opportunity to work with the European Union Human Brain Project, specifically as a task leader for dual-use brain science. One of the considerations that grew out of that was that absolutely none of those projects in the Human Brain Project, again, a multinational effort, can and should be uptaken into warfare, intelligence, and national security agenda. That's viable enough. The idea there is that these things should be used for only peaceful means. However, this also creates a challenge. And the challenge is simple. if in fact I choose not to train in particular ways, I choose not to train 3 days a week, if in fact those individuals who may choose to then conflict with me will then train in the ways that I do not, and train on the days of the week that I will not, they may opportunize a select advantage. What do we do about it? Again, I think it becomes at least a problematic issue for discourse because we recognize that in many cases the civilian sector not only is not amenable to engaging in this type of research, certainly many are, but in some cases should not engage in this type of research for those very proscriptions that I alluded to momentarily. However, the question then becomes, how do we appreciate the international challenge, risk, and threat that the advancements of the brain sciences and cognitive sciences offer for global weaponization, with the brain as the next battlescape? Clearly, it defines some type of a solution space, and there have been those that have posited, myself included, that there should be more directed, more detailed, and more dedicated government efforts in this particular domain, so able to advance the brain science in ways with sustainable funding to understand what the potential risks and threats are, and to develop a stance of preparedness. This becomes increasingly important when we take a look at those countries that have notable and identified programs of high level of investment of GDP and or other levels of economic investment.
Well, that's that's really interesting because the forecast that I saw through 2020, and I'll show you guys that it had us #1, then Israel, then China or Russia, and then China or Russia. That's very interesting how they left out the United States and Israel in these economic predictions for 2020. That is very, very interesting and very, very disingenuous.
Ways that are either directly usable or have some what I would call
Israel and the United States are above all of these countries that they're saying are at the top. United States and Israel. And I was in a comment section or a chat room or something. There was somebody from Egypt. There was a targeted individual from Egypt saying that he thought that the Mossad was carrying out his targeting. So if you think about it, Israel is a pretty small country, but they have Palestine and all these other Middle Eastern countries around them, like Egypt, Palestine, and other ones that I'm not going to list. But so who do you think they're going to experiment on? How did they get to the #2 position against a #2 position when you have the United States in there with a bigger population, China with a bigger population, and Russia with a way bigger population? It's because they're not just experimenting on their own citizens. They're experimenting on countries, citizens of countries around them. And who knows if China and Russia and us, if we're not doing the same thing.
An important consideration that I want you all to bear is that current estimates based upon trend analysis is that by 2025, greater than 50% of research, development, test, evaluation, and possible use of brain sciences in general will occur outside the West. Outside the West. Furthermore, we understand that there has been a directed effort in China to be able to engage the current and future 5-year plans, to be able to advance brain science in those ways, to be able to have a higher level of gravitas with regard to the research, its capability, and its translation in medicine and other agenda, inclusive possible dual use and direct use within warfare, intelligence, and national security. This creates opportunities for research tourism, medical tourism, and market capture. And again, that market capture can be leveraged as economic warfare in terms of being able to destabilize the global market and the global economics that is relevant upon this form of bioscience and technology. But we also recognize that these things are being used for military applications. Certainly, there are directed opportunities and directed agendas for doing that within China. We also recognize that there have been activities and directed initiatives in the former Soviet Union that have now been translated and perpetuated in the current Russian infrastructure of biomedical science for military purposes. And a number of other countries have directed efforts in this space, inclusive of Iran, North Korea, India, Bolivia. Certainly among the U.S. and its allies, we recognize that, the United States, UK, Canada, Israel. There are governmental efforts within Europe. We recognize also there are efforts in Japan. But there's another looming threat. The threat is the non-state actor. threat is the virtual nation.
Just an interesting side note here, because he mentioned Israel being, you know, and they're #2 right now in directed energy weapons technologies. They are not rolling out 5G. A lot of the technology that actually produced 5G came from Israel, came from tech companies and inventors and researchers in Israel, and yet they are not rolling out 5G in Israel. Yet everywhere else, 5G is being rolled out. Now, why? The people who had the most to do with 5G being created, why are they not rolling it out in their own country? If it's so safe, if it's so safe for us all, why is Israel not going to put out 5G like other countries? So I just want to get y'all thinking about that.
Establish sovereignty within a sovereignty, so as to be able to say that we are immune or inured to your rules and regulations. Essentially, possibly destructive diaspora. And increasingly what we're seeing is the use of Bitcoin currencies and the like allow the finances of these types of things to be sustained in ways that were heretofore economically unimaginable, if not incapable. So as a consequence, what we're recognizing is that the threat parameters, the risk parameters, as well as the challenge and opportunity parameters are growing. We're equally concerned about the do-it-yourself community, not because this community of biohackers represents an inherently malicious or nefarious group, but because of their relative vulnerability to infiltration. We recognize that to such an extent that at present, the Federal Bureau of Investigation in this country has dedicated ongoing efforts to try to maintain continued communication, interaction, engagement with this community so as to be able to better surveil their relative vulnerability to purloinment, infiltration, manipulation, and misuse. Clearly, if we're looking at these things as possible destructive weapons, the more characteristic or classic criteria of drugs, bugs, toxins meet at least some of the extant categorizations of the biological toxins, weapons, and chemical conventions. However, as disruptive agents, as those agents that may be assembled, developed anew, that do not meet these criteria, you can then get skirting of these extant treaties and these extant signatory documents, and as a consequence can develop these means, these methods, tools, and technologies essentially below the radar. Moreover, as disruptive elements, they need not be mass-produced or stockpiled, but rather their ingenuity is that they're able to be assembled in situ in relatively low quantities and used with specific effects against individuals and small groups to be able to incur disruptive effects, not only within that organism or that group of organisms, but beyond the organismic level, to the systems level, to the social level, to the geopolitical level. Great power that can be leveraged.
I want to add something in here, guys. You know, as targeted individuals, they're trying to disrupt our lives. So what he's talking about, disrupting the individual and different personalities. But then he talks about, you know, it's also about disrupting groups, disrupting communities. So, you know, think about it. I mean, think about the conference calls. Think about, you know, just the community of targeted individuals and how there's a lot of COINTELPRO in that community, how there's a lot of people collecting information or controlling the narrative or things like that, because they're doing that because we're the closest thing. They're already trying to disrupt our lives. So when we get together in groups, obviously they're going to be, you know, researching and studying how they can disrupt the groups that they're trying to disrupt the individuals in. So I just wanted to throw that in there. And I'm not saying, like, I love the conference calls. I haven't been on one for a while just because it's been so many years of being on them. And I kind of just feel like going round and round. I think we all kind of feel like we're just going round and round, and we're getting a little, we're kind of going forward, but we're not going forward fast enough. But I'm not saying that everybody on the conference calls is COINTELPRO. I'm just saying that's why we have so many problems with that, is because they're definitely experimenting on us in groups, seeing how they can disrupt the whole group or seeing how they can control the whole group. So, I mean, we really need to fight that and find better ways to fight COINTELPRO. I think just calling people perps isn't going to do it. And the goals that I see, the goals that I want for us is to get more concrete information out, to stabilize the real targeted individuals more and give us more power, give us more knowledge, so that we'll be more aware when we come up against somebody who is a COINTELPRO person or somebody in there to disrupt the group or direct the narrative. I think the more that we know and the more concrete evidence we get, and the further that we move forward, those things will become easier to combat. So I think it's the cart before the horse yet again with that problem there. But I just wanted to throw that in.
Clearly, what we can do is provocative. Therefore, what we should do remains at issue. Ladies and gentlemen, I do not have answers for you, but I will pose several questions and possibilities. One of the things we have to understand is that this represents, if you will, a bioscientific speedway. Consider the true speedway. Lots of entries. I've already shown you the entries. Very fast pace. The speed of translation from concept to construct in the brain science is about 60 calendar months, and increasingly that's being compressed. So the developments in the brain sciences that reach a tech readiness level can be achieved within 48 calendar months. It's very fast. Certainly we know not only there are many entries, it's very fast, but the prizes are tremendous. Economic prizes, prizes of notoriety in the biomedical front, prizes of power, capability, and weaponization on the wins front. Weaponization, intelligence, national security. We also recognize that there are risks and possible harms, not only to those who are on the track, but to those who surround it. So the idea is, if in fact we're going to move into the
us. When he says the people that surround the track, he means us. He means targeted individuals. There's great harm to us and our families because our military-industrial complex wants to get ahead with this technology. They're doing a lot of other things, not just advancing this technology. They're doing a lot of things, you know, building up the surveillance state, you know, learning more about psyops and stuff like that. And some of it does feed into, you know, the experimentation with neuroweapons. But when he says not only to the people on the track, harm to the people who are going down the track and using those weapons and advancing them, to the people who are surrounding the track, he means us. He means the people that they choose to use this on, who they choose to experiment on, people that don't know that it's being used on. That's who he means right there when he says that. I would bet $100 million that's what he means.
To the space, how can we move into the space with some prudence? How do we move into the space pragmatically? And how do we move into the space in such a way that is prepared? Our group was tasked with developing these protocols and paradigms, and we refer to them as the operational neurotechnology risk assessment and mitigation paradigm. The on-ramp to the neurobiotechnological speedway, if you will. I won't bore you by reading the slide, but I do want you to pay particular attention to the lower box. That's Zig Brzezinski. 1970, he was prescient, foresight. He said in 1970, in the coming decades, we will see an increasing viability and value of being able to affect the neurocognitive space. There was something of the sort of crystal ball in that statement.
And he also said, for saying, at a certain point in time, it becomes easier to kill 1 million people than to control 1 million people. So he's a great man, a great, evil son of a bitch.
We will be ever deepeningly there based upon not only our own initiatives, but those initiatives of groups around the country. This is a space that we need to at least be prepared for. A simple precautionary principle will no longer obtain. Why? Number one, it shouldn't. Number two, it's anachronistic. Just because we recognize that in some cases, the risks may be high and there may be certain benefits, a simple precautionary principle says if the risks or threats outweigh the benefits, don't go. However, we need to also be equally preparative and take a more advanced precautionary principle that says you must examine the potential, the probability, and the possibilities of what those risks and threats are relative to the benefits of a stance of preparedness. Preparedness very often includes engaging the research to understand how these things work and how they can be. How do we do it? Well, these are some of the contingencies that I offer simply as proposition for you. I ask you to consider them. Number one, what is the technical ripeness of any and all form of neuroscience and technology in these types of agendas? What are key situational variables that may be germane to its use or non-use? Is there evaluation or some revision of the various ethical concepts that may be able to guide these uses in practice? And might we need to develop, in some cases, new frameworks, new foundations of ethics that are more applicable, given the fact that the science and technology may be running at a speed to which our ethics and policies may not yet be apace?
So we need to find some ethics that are more applicable right? What does that mean? That means change. That means change the moral compass. You know, if it's not ethical to non-consensually experiment on human beings, well, we'll just change our ethics to like people who maybe live alone, or people who have surgeries, or maybe people who are outspoken. Maybe we'll just change our ethics to harming a certain type of person, somebody that's non-compliant, or somebody who has critical thinking. We can consider them enemies to the hierarchy, so we'll just change our, it's such BS.
I'm not going to bore you with these contingencies, but what I want you to do is pretty much go down to the very, very last one. The idea here is can we utilize neuroscience and technology? And if the answer is yes, we can, should we? And if the answer there is we already are, and there are some domains and dimensions by which use should be advocated, for example, non-lethality, least harm, doing less harm than other forms of interventions and engagements that are currently in use, being able to mitigate individuals' capacity or willingness to engage in volatility. In other words, improving the capacity.
Yeah, but then you throw in the false flag aspect, which he's not going into. And so they're picking out us as innocent Americans, and they're saying, oh, well, this person's dangerous, or they're crazy, or they did this or did that. Oh, well, we can go ahead and justify using these non-lethal weapons, which are really, really lethal. So it's like, okay, well, we can use it on some people to mitigate their aggressiveness. But what if it's an innocent civilian who's not doing anything wrong? And then they start being hit by these weapons, and they say, oh, look at that person. They're dangerous. They're acting crazy because we're being hit with microwaves. The false flag comes into all of this and determines who they can pick and who, it's just, ick. It's just BS.
Of the capacity for individuals to gain capability to get along, well, perhaps there's some value there. If these things are going to be used in a more hard weaponized approach, are they being used in those ways that are less harmful than other extant weapons? And/or what are the postures that we should adopt if, in fact, another nation utilizes this form of weaponology? What represents what I would consider to be comparative or appropriate proportionality? And ultimately, if, in fact, we're going to move into this space, and I think we are moving into this space realistically, not only now, but ever more in the future, we have the obligation and responsibility to assess whether or not the contingencies for consent to treat our own people are in place. In other words, if there are things we're going to do to optimize the performance and capabilities of our own personnel, and if there are things that are being done on the world stage, inclusive perhaps by us and our allies, that could mitigate, affect, or manifest change in other personnel, are we prepared to accept those responsibilities? The responsibilities for ongoing research, responsibilities for ongoing clinical care, not only of ours, but internationally, because of the role that the United States and our allies plays, and because of the need to take an upstanding moral front with regard to the fact that as we develop weapons, and as weapons are developed by us, our allies, and by others, the preparedness stance says we must all...
I just want to say one thing real quick, and I'll stop, and we're almost at the end. It's pretty long. I'm getting kind of tired, but I just want to say, how dare he take this ethical front when he knows that innocent citizens all over the world are being hit with this stuff, and they are researching with these weapons and trying to advance these weapons on innocent people. How dare he sit there and not tell them that, hey, we are screwing up right now? How dare he? Just want to throw that in there.
Also be equally assumed, equally in position to be able to not only counter those weapons, but mitigate and treat the effects that those weapons incur. And in fact, historically, very often what we've seen is that has been the interesting march of science, technology, and medicine, where advancements in medicine very often arise as a consequence of the possible utility of various forms of science and tech to be weaponized and the damage that they incur. But the question still comes up, ladies and gentlemen, what ethics shall we use to guide research, test, development, and perhaps utilization of neuroscience?
Well, right now they're using none.
Clearly here in the United States, as with any open society,
you're supposed to ask ethical questions, and you're supposed to say, should we use this before it's actually in full swing? That would be a better thing of caution to maybe ask these questions that he's asking before they just start using it on anybody and everybody, and innocent family members of people that they targeted, and just torturing everybody, just pick out oh, this person had a surgery and we got a doctor to implant him. Oh, this person said something at work that we didn't like. Oh, this person's studying this, or this person went to, some protest or something. I mean, maybe he should have asked these questions and told the Pentagon to ask these questions, before they just started using it on any innocent citizen in our country, in other military industrial complexes in their country.
A lot of transparency to the polis for our intents, our goals, and our operations. Absolutely, certain things are held confidential and classified. You don't show the other team your playbook on Friday and expect to win the game on Sunday. Yes, of course. And information we may understand about what they're doing by virtue of our deep and our intermediate surveillance may also be kept close to the chest, if you will.
Gotta keep them close to the chest. Gotta keep it secret. Let's hear that again.
Transparency to the polis for our intents, our goals, and our operations. Absolutely, certain things are held confidential and classified. You don't show the other team your playbook on Friday and expect to win the game on Sunday. Yes, of course. And information we may.
And when in a culture and in a hierarchy where the civilian population really is the other team, well, hey, they don't want to show the other team their advancement and what they're doing with this stuff. So that's another angle of why they're keeping all this covered up, because to them, to the military industrial complex, to the DOD, to the Pentagon, we are the enemy. Regular civilians, we are the enemy. We need to be controlled. So, I mean, geez, and that is just, it's so sick. And it actually applies not just to terrorists in other countries, maybe like North Korea, who we're not in good relations with. It applies to our own citizenry in in England, the citizenry of England, and all these other countries too.
Understand about what they're doing by virtue of our deep and our intermediate surveillance may also be kept close to the chest, if you will. But the transparency of military intent operations, goals, and interventions here in the United States has been paramount to the nature and fabric of our infrastructure, our politics, and our government. And the same is true for our allies. So at least part of this needs to be at least relevant to, afforded by, guided through civilian ethics. Why? Because in many cases, it is the civilian institutions that to date have been involved in at least some of the research and development that can be uptaken into dual or direct use agendas. And as such, these things are subject to, and I think validly subject
I guess now he's talking about universities and hospitals. There's civilian, civilian agencies or whatever to run these things through. But I mean, I guess you could kind of consider, the contractors too under the DoD, even though they have clearances and work hand in hand with the DoD and governmental agencies like the CIA. I guess that they would classify them, the military industrial complex would probably classify these private businesses, these contractors, as civilian agencies. I wouldn't. I would say that they're directly military. If they have clearances to do military work and they're also working hand in hand with the DoD, I would say that these private corporations, these contractors are military. But I think he would probably classify them as a civilian, civilian agency.
Subject to civilian ethics, science and technology, or biomedical ethics. But if we move increasingly away from that, if we say that indeed the proscriptions and prohibitions, such as those that are being proposed and leveraged by the European Union Human Brain Project and throughout the world by things like dual-use research of concern treaties, such as that which was developed at Asilomar, are taken to heart, and civilian agencies, institutions, and organizations are essentially sort of debanded, disbanded, debarred from their engagement in these types of activities, who then will uptake the torch? Increasingly, there's been some interest, consideration, and real discussion as to reinvestment in government agencies and government-sponsored agencies that are specifically and explicitly dedicated to these pursuits. So to avoid any confusion what the intent is, and to also avoid any confusion as to who's doing what. We don't want to get another scenario such as we do with Robert Oppenheimer looking at the first test of the atomic bomb and going, "What have I done? I am dead."
Yeah, I mean, they basically need to do that now.
You don't want to have those.
That's what they're doing.
You want to make sure that, in fact, those who engage the brain sciences for biomedical purposes of wellness, lifestyle, and enhancing the human condition are not necessarily confused with those who may then uptake these things into WIN's agenda. But if that's the case, and these things are moving more into governmental institutions, organizations, and initiatives, are civilian ethics even viable any longer? And if we engage military ethics, what military ethical principles will we engage?
I would say, what's that? What's the military ethic, the military protocol of scorched earth? I'd say those are the ethics they're following, and literally sometimes with like the California fires, like a scorched earth policy.
Development, research, surveillance of these particular things for just war. And if in fact these things are not used in a strictly warfare fashion where war is declared by the use of these agents, yet they still tend to be bellicose or disruptive, can we then say that we can justify their use? In other words, not just a just war, but their just use within this frame of conduct, whatever this may be. And or can we revive another older and less known tradition, which is called jus contra bello, which is justification for the use to prevent warfare. Here, the use of the neurocognitive sciences,
so laughable,
human terrain teams, psychological operations, such as narrative networks, may be viable to de-escalate the volatility and vulnerability towards violence and combativeness. But again, we need to—
And what are they doing with all targeted individuals? Escalating. With all of our cases where we're being attacked by this stuff, our lives were peaceful and okay before this, and they are escalating, trying to false flag, trying to make us agitated or anxious or so vigilant with the gang stalking and the attacks. They are escalating, and all of these protocols: escalation, 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 not de-escalation, not less war, more false flags, more trouble, more turmoil in communities. It's a direct contradiction of how the military-industrial complex is using this weaponry.
To what level we will engage us, and whether or not the
it makes me sick.
we have in place are viable and valuable to do this, and how these things can then be rendered on the international scale. Because if, in fact, this is going to demand the multinational global discourse that it will, then clearly the global relevance of any ethical approach needs to be considered. And ethics very often is said to have a big mouth but no teeth, but policies and international law has choppers that can, in fact, be retributive and can bite. What do these developments then incur? For ongoing iterations of Biological Toxins and Weapons Convention, as well as other treaties, policies, and international laws that may help to guide, direct, if not regulate and govern, the use of these particular implements. So the situation we're faced with, ladies and gentlemen, is as follows. As we begin to untangle the Gordian knot of the brain, the development of neuroscience and technologies, we've come to the precarious position of opening the proverbial can of worms.
And you have.
Of if, how, in what ways, to what extent, and when these techniques and technologies will be used, weaponized, intelligence, and national security agenda. I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that can has already been opened.
Yep.
It'll be our job.
At least he's telling the truth there.
To be able to navigate this new terrain, this brave new world, and what it incurs. This is Atlas. And the idea of Atlas was that Atlas balanced the integrity and well-being of the world upon his shoulders. I disagree. Atlas of the 21st century, as you see here, balances the world upon her head. What we know about the brain, what we're able to do with the brain, all those organisms that are embodied and have one that exist in their various environments, cultures, and ecologies. So brain sciences and its technologies confer tremendous capability of knowledge, intervention. Tremendous capability comes tremendous power. Tremendous power comes great responsibility. Look, that phrase is good enough for Spider-Man, certainly was good enough for Goethe and Nietzsche, certainly good enough for me, and I hand that off to you.
Yeah, it'd be good if any of our leaders or the hierarchy or the military use that saying. That'd be nice.
Puts the brain at our fingertips. Whether that's to help, heal, or to harm, it's simply the effect of the human condition and how we put this to play. You will, in your professional careers and your personal lives, see the brain sciences ever more infiltrated and integrated, not only into the battle space, but to the bedside, the boardroom, and beyond. They will be a part of your realistic lives in the way we engage each other, regard each other, treat each other, interact.
See, and you listen to him how he says that, how he says you will see this integrated into the battlefield in your personal lives. Well, it's not right now. Like, they're saying it's not. You know, the United States and all these other countries, they're denying that neuroscience is playing a role in the battlefield. They're denying that it really, they can't really read somebody's thoughts or anything like that. They're denying all that. So how's that going to happen? How's what he's saying going to happen where you're going to come across neuroscience in the battlefield and neuroscience in our personal lives near the bedside or whatever he said, if they're not researching and developing these weapons, these neuro weapons? So, I mean, just this is like his whole his whole presentation is just 100% concrete proof. If somebody watches this, then listens to what we have to say, they cannot say that this is not happening, because this is one of the most important things that the military-industrial complex is working on right now. They're doing it in the wrong way completely, but it's one of the most powerful technologies that's ever reared its head in the history of the world. I know this was a long one, guys, and I thought about stopping it 30 minutes in and just saying, okay, go watch it, but it's so important that I just wanted to play it through, get through it all today. And let's listen to the rest of it. And yeah, let's just listen to the rest of it.
Perhaps enter into combat. Understanding the brain sciences and their power will become one of your obligate responsibilities, not only as military officers, but as civilians of the 21st century global scale. I like to end a lecture like this, usually by giving you a little personal story. My dad, former Navy man, was an engineer. And one of the things Dad liked to do was build stuff, liked to tinker. I still like to tinker. I like to work with tools. My dad was a really bright guy. One of the things he did when I was a kid, he'd come home every month and bring me a new tool, teach me how to use it. So at a fairly short order as a young kid, I became pretty adroit, or at least I thought I was adroit with using tools. And with all of the impulsiveness and zeal of youth, getting a new tool with only partial knowledge, I remember one day Dad came home. He said to me, "Jim, here's a brand new tool." I took it from him. I said, "Thanks, Dad." And I went to go running off. Dad put his hand on my shoulder. He said, "Jim, slow down. Measure twice. Cut once. Sometimes you can't go back." Ladies and gentlemen, these are the brain sciences. They can and they will increasingly be used in national security, intelligence, and defense agenda globally. We need to measure twice, cut once. Make sure that the cut that we make is one that is for good, for right, is one that does not cut our own throats.
Man, that sounds great, but what they're really doing is they're cutting 100 times and then they're not even measuring. They're not even measuring once, and they're just like, hey, let's see what happens. Let's bombard this person with microwaves and see what happens. Let's get this community involved in gang stalking and do psyops. They're not even measuring or saying, what is this going to do to our communities? Maybe they are. Maybe they're measuring in the wrong way. They're like, how much damage can we do? How much damage can we do to everybody? So they're not measuring for good, like he says, but they're measuring for evil to make it harder for our country.
Others, those ways that are irreparable. I leave you with my father's wisdom. These are some of our white papers that we've submitted to the Strategic Multi-Layer Assessment Group of the Joint Staff of the Pentagon. I can make these slides available to you. These are now all open domain, available to your perusal. If you're interested in some of our ongoing work by my research group, provide you with some of our own work. This is the part of the lecture. I'm going to look right at the camera. Unabashed, self-promoting. If you're really interested in this, I've only had the wonder and opportunity to.
I got to try and get in touch with you guys.
So, if you're interested in going further down the rabbit hole, reading about this,
maybe I can interview him on YouTube.
I recommend this to you.
How cool would that be? I don't think he's going to help us though.
I'm proud of it, and I'm proud of it not because
I think he leaves stuff out. He knows what he can and can't say. And I think he would stay a million feet away from us in our problems. He talks about it. I don't know.
And some classified conferences that we had that was then subsequently declassified, and then also brought together international leaders in the field of military science, bioengineering, neuroscience, philosophy, ethics, by their perspective, their lens, their vision and voice as to what's going on in this domain at this point, with some speculation, vision, and proposition as to what may need to go on in the future, so he's able to opportunize the capabilities of the brain sciences and be prepared for the challenges that it offers in this space. I'd like to thank you all for your attention. I hope I haven't bored you. If you wish to get in touch with me, feel free. Just put in your subject line USMA, so I don't think you're trying to sell me Viagra. Not that I wouldn't buy it, but this way I know where it's coming from. If you want to ask questions, you have some time to do that now. If you don't get to your questions, feel free to email me. I will email you back. It may not be that day or even that week because I may be busy or traveling, but I will, in fact, email you back because that's my obligate responsibility to you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your time.
If you guys have any questions, we have about 5-10 minutes.
Yes, sir. Oh, yeah. Well, so there have been a number of different books. So the new book there is that the idea that psychedelic drugs had some bad research, and of course, some of that bad research was not only procedurally bad, it was based upon the font of knowledge we had at the time. Having engaged in psychedelic research, not perfect, well, maybe. Having engaged in psychedelic research, one of my first projects actually was looking at methylene dioxymethamphetamine ecstasy under United States Navy grant for the possibility of weaponizing ecstasy as a volatile agent, as a viable agent, particularly against submariners. So the understanding that the psychedelics could in fact be used in a variety of different ways, inclusive of weaponization, is not new. We look back to the older projects such as MK Ultra, Mind Control Ultra, which utilized lysergic acid diethylamide and psilocybin to be able to alter the cognitions, emotions, and behaviors of individuals to see if that could be leveraged not only against our own people, but against others. Some of the whole brainwashing.
And it's interesting, guys, how, you know, while MK Ultra was going on, everybody denied that it was happening, right? I mean, almost like our situation, a little bit. There are some parallels, but people denied that anything was going on like that. Then there was the huge, you know, huge hearings on it and people giving testimony in court cases and everything. Now today, people accept MK Ultra. Yeah, they were doing this. The CIA was doing this back then. It was experimenting on people non-consensually. So that's going to happen. That's going to happen no matter what in our situation. That's going to happen. It's just when is that going to happen? When are we going to sit there and people are going to be like, oh yeah, that was all that experimentation with directed energy weapons and stuff they were doing to people. They'll probably have a name for it. You know, it probably won't even be targeted individuals or whatever. There'll probably be some kind of name like MK Ultra, like, you know, I don't know, like some name, but I just want to throw that in there. So that will happen with us. We just want to make it as quick as possible, and we want to make sure that we're vindicated, and it's not long after we're, you know, gone from this earth.
Washing, mind-changing effect. However, one of the things we've come to recognize is that the mechanisms of these psychedelic agents is far more specific than we thought, and in fact can be incurred at far lower doses than were heretofore attempted either experimentally or in social practice. So there's a regenerated interest, a revivified interest in re-examining the mechanisms and effect of these psychedelic compounds, inclusive of lysergic acid diethylamide, psilocybin, dimethyltryptamine, as well as some that are sort of like borderline on what might be considered psychedelic, such as the affiliative drugs like MDMA, at microdoses or sort of intermediate microdoses, not only to treat individuals who had particular neuropsychiatric spectrum disorders, and there's a growing body of research that would suggest that even one-time administration of a therapeutic dose of LSD or psilocybin and or MDMA may have...
Kind of waiting to see if maybe anybody asks them about directed energy weapons, but I don't think they are.
We also recognize that these things may be useful in treating forms of TBI, treating other forms of psychiatric and neuropsychiatric disorders, and may also be viable as performance enhancers, particularly if given a very specific regimen at a very controlled dosimetry. So I think, like so many other things, the more we're learning about the brain suggests to us not only what we know, but what we didn't know, some of the errors in our previous ways of experimentation and theorism, and that allows us to revisit these things under a newer and I think more granular perspective that I think may demonstrate certain benefits, as well as giving rise to concern about certain burdens and risks. So I think that it certainly warrants continued research, and I think that we need to be cautious in how we interpret that research and its translational effect, but I think there's great benefit to be gained. Did I answer your question? Other questions? Yes, sir. Yes. Yes. In fact, I can tell you some ongoing research is being done now by the Air Force Research Laboratory. It's looking not only at the comparative use of what's called nootropic agents, as you said, modafinil and some of the newer ones. They've been around for a while, but they're sort of new with regard to the light of their potential utility. Some of those drugs, like piracetam, pramiracetam, oxiracetam, these have been around for a long time, but now we're understanding their mechanisms a little bit better, and we're recognizing how we be able to use them in concert with other agents, inclusive of something like caffeine, and or how we can also utilize these agents at lower doses that are much more safer doses that can also then be co-potentiated through the use of various devices. Here, we're talking about the transcranial devices such as transcranial magnetic stimulation, transcranial electrical stimulation. And if you're interested in some of this work, I refer you to a colleague of mine who's at Air Force. He's a Wright Pat, and his name is Andy McKinley. Just look up some of Dr. McKinley's work in this area. It's stellar.
And so he's saying that the Air Force Research Laboratory is working on, electrical transcranial stimulation, electromagnetic transcranial stimulation.
Exactly.
I mean, he's admitting that, but I mean, I guess with this presentation, he pretty much admits by logic and by common sense, if these weapons are being advanced and they're doing research and development on them, they have to do them on human beings to understand how human beings are going to react to these things. So by common sense, what he's talking about, they are doing experimentation. I mean, they are doing experimentation because we are being targeted, but this presentations like these just solidify it. It's just concrete.
Can we engage certain brain substrates, nodes, and networks through the use of new pharmaceuticals or older pharmaceuticals that are redosed or pharmaceutically delivered in different ways, to maximize key aspects of the processes of those neural functions that are operative in key tasks for the intelligence operator or warfighter? And in so doing, can we then take a slightly different stance on our postures towards the viability and value of these drugs under controlled circumstances for the warfighter or intelligence operator? And I think that's the general idea. Did I answer your question? Cool. Other questions? Going once, twice. Thank you all.
All right, guys. So I know that was pretty long, but it's so important. It's such important information, and it's just like, I mean, that is proof. That is proof that when somebody listens to that, they listen to targeted individuals, then they're advancing those weapons, they're advancing neuroweapons, the capabilities of them, what we're saying matches up completely. So, yeah, it was getting pretty long. I was thinking of maybe stopping it at 30 minutes. I appreciate all you guys in here. Hey, Chaz. Hey, Tim. Hey, Perp Patrol. Yeah, no taxation without representation. They can spy through any human's eyes or ears. And that's what that is. It's not like they, some TIs think they have cameras in their eyes, but it's actually what they're doing is they're entraining the brain. They're getting remote neural monitoring from the occipital lobe. So when you see something, that signal of what you're seeing is going to your occipital lobe. Cool. Hey, Autumn, how are you doing? Thank you for moderating for me. All right, guys, I think I'm going to wrap it up. I'm kind of tired. I didn't plan on doing a very long video, but I saw this morning, and I know that we hear from James Giordano on my channel a lot, but it seems like he is like the spokesman in the United States for neuroweapons. And I'm trying to look for other people that talk about it as detailed as he does. And he gets up there, and there are some things, like he said, they can't let the bad countries know exactly what they're doing. So he can't get up there and say, hey, we are experimenting, on innocent civilians in our country. He can't say that right out. His talk about ethics when he does know that this is being used on innocent citizens kind of makes me mad. All right, guys. I'll see you on the next one. I'll probably make a short kind of update video this weekend. I'm not sure because I've been feeling, I'm making it, but really bad headaches and just brain fog so much. My memory's so bad, and I kind of feel uncomfortable. Like I'll think of something really good to make a video about, but then I'll forget a lot of it. So I either have to start writing things down or do something. But thanks. Hey, thanks y'all for coming. I hope y'all are doing well. I just hope you're using some of the defenses. I love you guys. All right, and I'll see you on the next one.